What's up, everybody? Welcome, dissidents, one and all. This is the Do Dissidents podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss, here with a man who has to unmute his microphone, so give him just 1 second. Russell Dobular is here with me this evening.
In the house, hello!
In the house, hello. You know, we were talking earlier today that we wanted to do a sort of beef-free show tonight, a drama-free show tonight, to show all of you new subscribers who maybe found us through the Kyle and Crystal stuff and the RBN stuff and the Vanguard stuff and the Marianne stuff, that, you know, we can do a show without any of that and still be good.
We wanted this show to be classy.
We wanted to do a classy performance for you.
No pinching, no smacking, none of that.
We thought, let's show we can do something a little above the fray and see how it plays. We'll see how it goes. We'll see who shows up. We'll see who sticks around, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm reading the chat here as we get started, and I did not know this. This is news to me. Is this actually true? Emoji says the Vanguard just fired shots back at Do Dissidents and fans. I don't know what you mean by fire shots back, Emoji. We've never had a bad word to say about those guys. I mean, we've never said anything about those guys. I don't understand what they'd be firing back about.
They look like nice young men.
Yeah. And then they said that Do Dissidents is doing what they did when they first started, riding Jimmy's balls. Interesting admission on their part that their viewers were the most depraved losers. Or something like that. Well, that's on you guys, not us.
That's on you. I think you should all tell Vanguard what you think about that. You fucking depraved degenerates. I you know, it just shows these fake leftists. Just because most of our audience resides at Folsom Prison based on YouTube's algorithm doesn't mean they're depraved.
Exactly. You
They're
ever hear of the prison industrial complex?
That's right. Most of them are innocent.
Right. Most of them just took pleas. That's why they have to dial. They have to go get, you know, whatever 3 minutes on the phone in order to call in a super chat with their friend. That's how the super chats come in.
And that's how.
And we appreciate you doing that because it takes a lot of effort to do it that way.
You could get shanked grabbing the phone.
Yeah, exactly. Put themselves a great risk.
Our people risk a shanking to super chat us.
To super chat us. Your mother was a hamster with a $3 super sticker. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. Your mother was a hamster. Really appreciate that. Your mother was a hamster. Again, not going to great lengths to disprove the Vanguard's thesis about our fans.
Depraved.
Yeah,
sick.
Depraved, sick. Sick. Unlike the high society they attract over there, I'm sure. But, you know, it's funny because...
Perversion, it's sick. It's degenerate and sick.
I love that drop. We haven't hit that one in a while.
I mean, it kind of begged for it.
Yeah, it was right there. I didn't have the soundboard in front of me because I'm actually reading the chat here, trying to keep up. But, you know, I went back and I watched some of the live chat from the last show. And yeah, you guys were having a lot of fun at Crystal and Kyle's expense. The reason I watched that chat, by the way, and this is something that I wanted to address either way at the top of the show, we did make the mistake last time of missing some super chats. In all seriousness, we are very sorry about that. We did not intend to obviously miss super chats. It's our goal to read every single one. We had a record crowd in here last week because we had a lot of new subs. We had 500 people in here at a time, and the chat was just moving faster than ever before. And so we literally just missed some, and we are sorry about that. We will make a point not to do that again. We'll be more vigilant because obviously, hopefully, knock on wood, the chats will continue to get faster and faster and more active. So we'll just have to keep a closer eye on them. So yes, we are sorry if we missed your super chat, but we do thank you very much for your help in that way, obviously. Dave Dillerai, did we look into official secrets yet? I have not looked into it yet. We do I'll do a lot of that stuff this week. My wife starts a new job this week, so I'm going to be home babysitting. Maybe I'll watch that with my 4-year-old twin boys. What do you think? Would that be good for them? I don't know. I'll be home starting at like from noon to, you know, on through the day, these next few days. And so I'll have time to watch it. We pulled this show together kind of last minute. This show actually took some research, took some work to prep this show. This is not like, you know, I don't mean to bring it up, but it's not like what the Vanguard does or what we did last week where we played a couple of videos and laughed at them. You know, that doesn't take much prep. This we're actually doing subject matter this evening.
Yeah, it's not like just riding Marianne Williamson's balls.
Exactly.
This was like a real show, and you know I'm a little more neurotic than Keaton in some ways. He's more neurotic than me and others. So I'm like, but I'm the one to make the panic phone call. Like, there's too much. There's too much. I'm trying to prepare this, and so he got that, and that's what he said. He was like, yeah, because we're not just trashing another video tonight. It takes work.
Right. We're not just doing Mystery Science Theater tonight. We're actually doing segments, right? John Locke. Thank you, John Locke. Glad the show is growing. Well, glad you're here with us, and thank you so much for the $10. I appreciate it. Devin,
I heard
our
Thoreau
producer, Devin. What's that?
I heard Thoreau was dropping by later.
Oh, yeah. Let's see if we can get a little auction going between the two of you. Welcome to our show, everyone. For bonus material, including Ellen Jimerson outtakes and Russell's feet and guest appearance rate, send me a note. Yeah, send Devin a note. I should have the Vanguard get in touch with you guys if they want to debate us. We'll say email our producer, Devin. Jay the informant. DD insulted their honor. Vanguard must defend their honor. No, but honestly, Greg, keep up the work. Screw the Vanguard. Hey, listen, I mean, there's no such thing as bad press. No such thing as bad press. Not. So, that's fine. That's fine.
Or in the immortal words of Oscar Wilde, Devin will appreciate this. There's only one thing worse than being talked about. Not being talked about.
Right, exactly. Not being talked about. Right. Well, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Did we just get another $10 roll in? I just got another super chat here. Glad the show is gone, though. That's from John Locke. Okay, I'm trying to see how...
More money.
Thank you, guys. Off to a very generous start. We appreciate that very much. We do have a very highbrow show for you this evening.
Not that you could tell so far.
Right. Not that you can tell so far.
We're going to shift gears. We promise.
And by the way, I mean...
Yeah, you go get your toilet water gin and your home-rolled cigarettes and your Johnny Cash albums, and you get ready.
Get your Colt 45s.
Yeah.
Right. Get your Steel Reserves. Exactly. And we'll have a little party here. Before we start our regular segments, though, we like to kick the show off with some headlines. And so here are some headlines from the past week, some little quick hits for you here. Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and more blitz South Carolina and Iowa in 2024 preseason. While the Republican primary as a whole is still ramping up slowly, the race is about to enter a new and more active phase. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley plans to launch her presidential campaign in less than 2 weeks with an event in Charleston, South Carolina. Senator Tim Scott will kick off a listening tour a day after from the same city before following Haley to Iowa. We should do a listening tour. That sounds pretty easy. Sounds like all we got to do is show up, right?
Just show up, listen.
No,
I hear you. Yeah. I hear you.
Should we do a Due Dissidents listening tour where we charge $25 a head and the audience just talks to us? We just sit there?
We'll call it the Lived Experience Tour.
Right, the Lived Experience Tour. The Due Dissidents Lived Experience Listening Tour. And then, we sit on the stage, we watch you guys talk, and then, we'll sign autographs after. Former Vice President Mike Pence will be in Charleston next week, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will start traveling the country after the February 28th release of his memoir, headlining back-to-back dinners in Houston and Dallas. Okay, so if he's got a memoir coming out, that means he's obviously getting in.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Nobody bothers to hire a ghostwriter for one of those unless they're actually going to run for president.
Right.
Clearly, he's running for president. Nikki Haley, I don't know what she's running for. It's been suggested she's running for vice president. I think that's probably true. She's running to be in the mix for whoever actually wins. I think with the logic, you don't really want to have a ticket that's going backward. So you probably want a woman in the VP slot. You don't really want two white dudes. Now, the optics of it wouldn't be great.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably true. I think, Haley's thinking could be that she's running for VP. It could be that she thinks she can break through. I mean, the thing about this Republican primary is it's all going to come down to how much mojo the base is feeling. If the base is feeling confident, like they got this, like Biden is weak and they're going to pounce on him, they might just go with Trump. Because if they're that full of themselves, that's how Trump would get it. If they take the midterms as a lesson, which I think is the smarter play. It's not necessarily the play they'll make. They will realize that out of necessity, they're going to have to make a certain adjustment. That leaves an opening for DeSantis. Obviously, Haley is way down the list there. It would be extremely difficult for her to make anything happen, especially since she is of the sort of Bush-era neocon variety. And the Republican base seems pretty turned off by that now. That doesn't seem to be just this sort of mild conviction of theirs. So, I think it's still between DeSantis and Trump. But, her throwing in gives Trump an official rival now. So now it's an official contest. And we'll see what happens. Look, I hate to say this, but I think Nikki Haley would be a very, very formidable general election candidate against Joe Biden. I really do. That's not to say I feel good about that. I think her whole foreign policy attitude is quite frightening. But, she's definitely competent, and she's definitely on the short list for VP.
Yeah, I think anyone running on the Republican side is going to be formidable against Biden.
Yeah.
Tim Scott being in there, that's interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
Does he think he can really win that? I don't know. I suspect that they know that it's going to be DeSantis or Trump. And, it's like any primaries. You get people who get in to boost their profile and hope to get a job with the administration, preferably VP. But, I'm sticking to my guns. DeSantis is going to emerge the victor.
All right. Well, we'll be talking a lot more about DeSantis later on in the show. We're going to learn from last time and just kind of knock these super chats out as we get them. So, Charlie, thank you so much for the $10. And thanks for being here this evening. Your thoughts on the 109 Democrats officially making socialism in America evil? Yeah, that was one of our headlines on our last
that was
show.
Stalin. Okay, that was Stalin. This is a MAGA show, Charlie.
Exactly.
I don't know what the fuck you think this show's about.
Right. We covered that last time as one of the headline segments, actually. Look, it's something that I think was pretty predictable. The only unpredictable thing in there was that Ro Khanna would sign on and condemn the evils of socialism, but all the usual suspects, including most notably and most importantly now, you'd have to say Hakeem Jeffries, signed on for that. And so that just shows you what the direction of the party is going to be for the next 30 to 40 years. But awful, obviously. Thank you once again. All right, we have one more here. The Brocialist, let's go. Thank you. That's an easy one, but thank you for the $4.99 Brocialist. I appreciate that very much. And here we go. A long story short, DeSantis all the way, CRT is grift on steroids. Oh, see, so we have a right wing. What did they call them? Degenerate. What did they call the audience? Depraved. That's
depraved. Depraved degenerates.
Depraved degenerates or something.
Serial
like that.
Killers.
Oh, that's funny.
As a lover of the Addams family, I appreciate our audience being seen that way.
Yeah, no, I think that's fun. That's our target audience. Like, that's the audience we want. If we had a highbrow audience who was easily offended, well, yeah, they have a sense of humor, right? I mean, the average left-wing audience is so boring. They would just be turned off by what we say, or they'd be offended, or they wouldn't get it. I mean, who wants that? Tusker, thank you so much for the $2. Marianne W. should run in the Republican primary. Why not? She go to Iowa. Yeah. All right. Is that everything? Cool. That's everything. Depraved losers is what Ellen says. Depraved losers. Our friend Ellen is a Patreon supporter. She's in the studio right now as a Patreon caller. Patreon supporters have call-in access to this show. So, Ellen, as always, just unmute if you'd like to speak at any time. All righty, let's head on down.
Loser.
Yeah, you depraved loser. Headline number 2. Here we go. Russell, this is all you.
This is all me. When it's pop culture, it's all me. Keaton's parents were Amish, and he still hasn't caught up on his pop culture. All right, so this is further evidence of something that I've harped on in a lot of these segments. There is this narrative that comes out of Hollywood whenever people hate shows like Miss Marvel or shows like She-Hulk, that it's the ists and the phobes, and there keep emerging these examples where you have shows with exactly the same themes, shows that deal with sexism and racism that do phenomenally well with exactly the same audience that will review bomb these Disney, mostly, let's face it, mostly Disney shows on Rotten Tomatoes. And the difference is they're fucking good. They're good. And also, you don't feel like the show hates its audience. And you also don't feel necessarily like the show doesn't exist in the world we actually live in, but it exists in the world as experienced by very rich LA diversity hires and what they picked up in their social theory classes at Brown. So The Boys has a very strong Me Too subplot that starts right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, there's a sexual assault of one of the characters. That's a running thing through the rest of the show. Like, it's not shying away from those ideas. What distinguishes The Boys from the kind of crap that you get out of Disney is it feels like it's in the world that we're in. Yes, it does talk about those things. It does talk about racism, but it also has a lot to say about corporate power and the way that corporations are able to define our perceptions and our experiences. So all the superheroes in The Boys, for those of you who've seen it, all the superheroes in The Boys are working for a corporation that markets them and sends them on their assignments and tells them what to do. And there's just this evil, huge mega corporation. It doesn't shy away from taking swipes at the right. There was an entire season where Homelander was kind of like, okay, so what if Superman were a psychopath? This character is leading basically a white nationalist movement. But they also make jokes about how they pimp out their lesbian superhero with products like Brave Maeve soft drinks and things like this. They show how they use their one African American team member to sell energy drinks. So it feels like it's a broad satire on the world that we live in. And particularly the fact that The Boys is commenting on an evil corporation and the way that it uses its brands to hide what it's really doing. It's hard not to draw a comparison to Disney itself, because that is very much the story of Disney, which is notoriously terrible for workers, which is currently being sued by women for unequal wages, that has thanked concentration camps in China in its credits, that changed its ad campaigns for Black Panther, covering up Chadwick Boseman's face so as not to offend the Chinese. And yet they'll come back and do Strange World and Virtue Signal with this. So Disney will never produce something that feels as much like the world we live in as The Boys does, because they are it would reflect very badly on the role that they play in that world. So The Boys, with a much smaller budget than anything that Disney is doing, finished the 11th highest streamed show last year. And it's the only superhero show that finished in the top 15. None of the Disney Plus shows with these mega budgets finished in the top 15 for the year. So I think the overall message the audience is sending is that they're not troglodytes, but you can't just shovel a lot of slogans at them and expect them to be entertained.
All right. Well, like I said, that was yours. I got nothing.
I know you got nothing.
Well done. All right, we're going to move on to number 3 in just a second. Craig Pasta Jardula from the Convo Couch. Thank you.
Craig. What's up,
Pasta? Thanks for the $2. Don't forget to plug your other platforms. Yes, thank you for saying that, actually. That is true. We are on Rumble. We are on Rockfin. So if you're on any of those platforms, please find us there. And if any of you guys are on Twitch, if you can go follow us over on Twitch, that's a big help, because apparently when you get 100 followers on Twitch, you're able to upload videos to Twitch and kind of treat it like somewhat of a YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin type channel. So we'll be able to like post our content there. Until you get 100 followers, I think you can only stream. But once we get 100, we can actually like treat that like its own channel and upload videos and stuff. So if you're on Twitch, please follow us there. And if you're not on Twitch, if it's easy enough to sign up and follow us there, then yes, please do so. But thank you, Pasta, for the $2. And Pasta, expect a text or an email from me fairly soon about maybe co-hosting an episode while Russell is in India. We'll just have to figure out what his schedule is going to be, because we have the 9th and the 12th, which on the 9th we have Extra Bulla is hosting with us. And I also confirmed that on Sunday, February 12th, which is Super Bowl Sunday, so we will be on at 4 p.m. that day. I'm going to be co-hosting that with JB from the Revolutionary Blackout Network. So that should be really fun. Really looking forward to that. We had a great talk with him last week on his show, on his channel. And so we look forward to welcoming him to ours. And go subscribe to Jay's channel if you can. I'll post the link later on in the chat here. Extra Bulla found his way to Twitch. The hell is this? Yeah, there you go. You made it. You made it, sir. Good to hear.
That's like a Twilight Zone episode where you walked into a parallel dimension. You can't figure out how to get out.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Good luck making it out of there. All right, folks. So here's a strange story that we all know about. February 4th, 2023. U.S. shoots down a Chinese spy balloon off the East Coast. So there was something spotted over the Montana sky a few days ago, and it turns out that something was a Chinese spy balloon.
99 red balloons go by.
And then a couple days later, it made it all the way to the coast of Carolina, and it was shot down off of Myrtle Beach, which is a resort town for upstate New York retirees, basically. Like, I swear, I have half a dozen friends whose parents live in Myrtle Beach right now. Like Hudson Valley, boomers retire to Myrtle Beach. It's a big thing. And it's not even like that big a town, but they get a lot of upstate New Yorkers or mid-Hudson Valley New Yorkers down there. But it was shot down off the coast of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Apparently, it was a Chinese spy balloon. What it was doing here, I don't know. I did not find this story to be all that interesting. As you can see, we'll pull it up in here. You could kind of see it in the sky there, just this kind of odd thing floating above the sky. It's like that movie Nope, but for white liberals, where they get where there's some mysterious thing in the sky that's scaring them. And turns out it was a Chinese spy balloon. But yeah, let's see. I mean, I don't know. China's calling this an act of aggression against a civilian aircraft. And we're saying, I guess, I don't know, go get your shine box. Who knows? Who cares? This is an issue. I know Craig Postage, our Lula, is actually very big on this issue. Maybe you can come when you co-host, when you guest host with me. Maybe you can educate us on this China thing, because I know Craig on his show a lot talks about the Republicans as the China hawks, just much in the same way that Democrats are the Russia hawks. You're very likely right about that. This is one of these issues that is just, too sophisticated for a couple of degenerate, depraved losers like Russell and myself and our audience. So
a couple of smooth-brained Jimmy Dore ball riders.
Yeah, right. A couple of ball riders that we are. We haven't had time to really look into the significance of the spy balloon, but it's shot down now, and they're upset about it, and we don't care, and that's that. That's that story. We just felt like we kind of had to mention it, just because we'd be negligent if we didn't, right?
I mean, look, it's significant in that I don't have to tell you. You have a lot of people. We covered it last week, including people in the Pentagon, who are dying to pull a George C. Scott and Dr. Strangelove and just drum up a war with China.
Right.
So that's why it's significant. I mean, they're going to use this to inflate their military budget again. Not that they need any excuses. And to start to take the kind of inflammatory action against China that they took against Russia for decades, until finally Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yeah, and from a media perspective, it's kind of funny. Like, a lot of the real Biden loyal media outlets were praising him for restraint when he didn't shoot it down, but then as soon as he did shoot it down, the Dark Brandon thing was trending again. So it's
that becomes the other. Yeah, whatever.
Exactly.
Whatever serves their purpose.
Right. Just like
they can change on a dime. They know their viewers will never hold them accountable.
Right. Exactly. So they could just get away with it. So that was kind of interesting. All right. Here's another.
That's the thing with having an audience of people that have killed before. It keeps you honest.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Here's Our final quick headline of the night here: Tyree Nichols' mother and stepfather to attend the Biden State of the Union speech. Now, this was something that's obviously it's their choice whether to attend or to not attend. Bill Maher, on his show said that this is sort of tragedy porn, that it's too close and it's sort of exploitative to bring them there. And, I mean, he's entitled to think that. I think, this is a very personal call that's up to the parents, whether they want to accept the invitation and they feel good about doing it. So I guess they'll do it. I'm curious as to how much ball riding Joe Biden will do to the police with them there, because Biden likes to compliment the cops as often as he can, right? There was that big speech. He said, we shouldn't defund the police. We should fund them. He has added a lot of cop funding over his 2 years in office here. And as he kicks off year number 3 with, the parents of Tyree Nichols in the audience, it'll be interesting to see how he addresses that issue, because you are going to have parents in the audience whose child was just tossed around by 5 fascist murderer cops. And so we'll see what the messaging is on that issue. You never know. But the State of the Union is this Sunday, February 7th.
My prediction, and this could be wrong. This could be wrong. My prediction is he stays off the whole police subject.
Right.
I do not think that with them there, whoever writes his speeches, because let's face it, he doesn't make these decisions. Whoever puppeteers him for that State of the Union, I cannot imagine is going to put in, and let's hear it for our boys in blue.
Right.
I imagine they're going to do that.
Yeah, no, my guess would be that they won't. Now, I know that you guys are probably not into watching the State of the Union. I imagine our audience is not interested. Can we, however, sweeten the deal a bit for you by saying you can watch the State of the Union with us? So we are planning to do a live stream watch party / Mystery Science Theater commentary of the State of the Union. That'll be this Tuesday. I believe it starts at 9 p.m. And so we will go on the air at 8:45 here on YouTube and on Rumble and on Rockfin. We'll be streaming that from a nice copyright-free public domain whitehouse.gov YouTube channel, so we'll have no issues, and we can just watch the State of the Union comments and then give our takes on it afterwards. Like I said, I hope that sweetens the deal for those of you who don't want to watch it. We don't really want to watch it either, but we kind of feel, being in this space, degenerate, depraved losers that we are, we should try and up our game a little bit and watch it. So we'll watch it with you guys. What do you guys think? You guys down for a Tuesday night live stream? We'll start at 8:45, and we'll watch the State of the Union. We'll have a laugh at it. We'll comment on it, and then we'll give our takes after. So be there if you can. That'll be Russell's final live stream before going to India, too. It'll be your chance to wish him a bon voyage. So please be there.
It'll be my last one before I flee these wretched shores.
Exactly. Let's take a couple of super chats. You guys are very generous tonight. I think you guys took a little offense to the Vanguard calling you a bunch of losers. You're saying, hey, we got money. We'll prove it right now.
We haven't been spending at the prison commissary all week to send you guys some cash.
Right, exactly.
I went without toothpaste.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Does Russell believe Adrian Zen's ASPI RFA view of camps in China? If so, could you invite Lee Camp on? How about Keaton? Kapanga's in the Hamptons. That went over my head. We could have actually. I'm sure Craig Pasta would be able to answer that, but I would love to have Lee Camp on. Actually, that'd be great.
That would be awesome.
He does some great work, and I would love to have him on. Absolutely. So
he definitely filled the Daily Show void for me for quite a while.
Oh yeah. Lee Camp.
After Trevor took over, it became unwatchable.
Yeah. No, Lee Camp is he's very good. He's very good. Mr. Methuselah, $10. Thank you so much. Discovered your show 2 months ago. You folks present the most intelligent analysis of politics and current events, including the humor. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. I wish I could fully agree with you, but I do appreciate it nonetheless.
We'll take it.
We try, but thank you so much. Tom Stratton, I found Jimmy Dore because you guys say his name. who's riding whose balls now.
Yeah. He can't stop talking about us.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Just can't stop talking about us. All right. So we have, before we start the show, we have one more segment that we're going to do, the Sunday Funny segment. Now, we were going to do a parody video that Russell made, but we want to have a tradition of self-created satirical content every Sunday, which we're going to kick that off when Russell returns from India, because it's going to be difficult for him to keep up on his word while traveling India to create satirical content every week.
I mean, my suggestion was, I'm in India. I do videos that are deeply culturally insensitive. It writes itself, but Keaton felt that could hurt us.
Yeah, I didn't think that was the smartest thing to do. It also could get you, I can't have you get killed over there. That's the other thing.
I know,
you know what I mean?
I know,
Like,
I
that
know.
would really screw up. That would really blunt the momentum of the show. As if you died in India.
It would. I'll probably be funnier dead, though. That's why I'm bringing my bat snake repellent.
Yeah. But we did have,
And God bless anyone in the audience who got that reference.
Yeah. I didn't.
Keaton sure didn't.
No, I just said yes, like I always do. It's hard to tell when I get something or when I don't get something. I react the exact same way. But I'm keeping track of two different things here. We have a super chat here from Jay the Informant. Thank you so much. Biden and Harris are using the tragedy of TN to say vote for me, black folks. Remember TN. TN is his 2024 George Floyd. I fell for it in 2020. Look, unfortunately, there's a long tradition of presidents exploiting bereaved families at the State of the Union. I know Trump did it. I think with the, parents of murdered people who were murdered by an undocumented immigrant, people killed in war or terrorist attacks or shootings. It's just something that happens. They try to just pull on, people's heartstrings in that way. So yeah, I mean, it's not super unusual. And there are certain people who just think we should do away with the State of the Union since politics is so polarized now. Like, it used to be the point of the State of the Union was to unify the country. And now it's just the opposite. Right. You have the Republicans give the rebuttal after, where they try to score their points, right? And then the Democrats give a sort of addendum speech or rebuttal to the rebuttal. So, some people have argued we should just do away with it entirely. But anyway,
okay, I'm just gonna say, and this is not praise for Bill Clinton the man, but in his prime, that guy had skills. Right in the middle of the Monica Lewinsky scandal and impeachment, all of that is going on. His impeachment is pending. And it was a very charged State of the Union. How is Clinton going to handle himself? Right? Everyone thought he's going to fall apart, or he's going to look nervous, or he's going to look tense. That guy went up there, and it was maybe the most brilliant performance of his career. He was calm, he was cool, he was charming, and what he did was classic Clinton. He put together a speech that was all I'm for good things and against bad things, and basically dared the Republicans to sit on their hands, which of course they had to do. So the optics of it was basically Bill Clinton going up there and saying, yes, we have to protect our children from drugs. And all the Democrats clapping and the Republicans sitting there like that.
Right.
It was absolute genius. So going back at least that far, the State of the Union has not been a unifying event for presidents. It's been a political show. If I have to think back to like when did that really start, I would say it was during the Clinton impeachment.
All right, let's read our Sunday Funny for the week. Now, you've noticed, everybody who's here, that we've added some decent number of subscribers.
Hang on, I don't want to cut you off. I just wanted to give credit to the person who got it.
Okay,
Techno Estate, the Bat anti-shark spray. If you've ever seen the original, very campy 1966 Batman with Adam West, there is a classic scene where he's hanging from a helicopter with an obviously rubber shark biting his leg, and he pulls out his Bat anti-shark spray.
I've seen that movie quite a few times actually, but I don't.
You don't remember the bat anti-shark spray? It's like,
no, you know
it's the
why?
most
Because I saw that
ridiculous
movie.
scene.
No, because you know when I saw that movie when I was a child, so I don't remember it that well.
Well, but you never forget a good bat anti-shark spray bit.
I did.
All right, remember the Batusi? That wasn't in the movie. That was in the TV show.
Yeah, that must have been the TV show. Yeah, no, I don't remember that, but I did see the movie quite a few times actually when I was a kid. I like that movie. Because we've added a decent amount of subscribers, you've arrived on the scene in a certain sense when you start getting hate mail. And so we actually received our first bit of genuine hate mail to our email address. I won't say the name of the person who sent it, and I won't read the whole thing because it's quite long. But unless this was an alias for one of the Vanguard guys, who knows? This came in right after our show.
Well, no, it doesn't say Gavin and it's crossed out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right, exactly. This came in right after our show on Thursday. I watched you sit there. I'm reading off my phone now, folks. I watched you sit there with that other tool bag, Russell, and call about 25 other people stupid or dumb. Projection much? No, that's not projection. I just think they're dumb. When I insult someone's penis size, that's projection, but not this. This is real, okay? I just happen to believe that they're dumb. I did that for you because you didn't think that this was going to be funny. So I told you I could sell it. You're too grown up. This is back to him. You're too grown up, ineffective, half-baked geldings screaming at a screen about other people on the left. You're two jokes. Who do you think that isn't actually very dumb or stupid really buys into what you're saying, acting as if you're so much more knowledgeable a lefty that you had to turn right to find comfort from those idiots on the left? Get the fuck out of here. This is my favorite line. You sound like the thankfully dead cripple Charles Krauthammer. That sounds, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like a Trump line. You sound like the thankfully dead.
It really does.
Charles Krauthammer.
Now who's taking comfort on the right?
Yeah, now who's taking comfort in the right? Who's the Red-Brown Alliance person now? Who used to state from his wheelchair on Fox that he was once on the left, but then he grew up. He was a cripple because he was mind crippled. So then it goes on a tear about Charles Krauthammer. The wheelchair was because of an awful college accident. Russell and you are like two boring know-it-all guys at a bar, huge jack-offs with a dismissive nature. All the talent of Jimmy Dore and his lovely wife. Jimmy Dore, zombies, RBN, now you fools. Lackeys blabbering to the right about how awful your supposed side is to make a buck. Classic, easily moved, low character, quizzling stuff. That's my nice review, by the way.
Well, he says
so I emailed him back. I said, but other than that, you like it? Yeah. Other than that, what do you think?
But other than that, what did you think of the play?
Yeah, right, exactly.
What do you think of the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this guy lives in New York. We're having a beer on Friday.
Oh, yeah, he did say that he lives in New York City. That was one of the things that he mentioned.
We're gonna hang out. What always gets me about stuff like this is why would you bother? Why would you bother? I mean, I don't like a lot of things, but to actually write a letter?
Well, that's what's great about this. This was sort of old-fashioned. It's sort of retro. It's hate email. You know, a lot of people have bashed us on social media here on YouTube and in Facebook and on Twitter. A lot of people give us shit there.
I never really understand that either. But
there's something kind of charming about the hate letter. You know what I mean? Yeah, because it's not for other people to read. Like, he's not just grandstanding so that other people can read his comment and like it. Like, he's not doing it for ego. He's doing it because he genuinely hates us. So I admire that in a way.
You got a point. You got a point. That's like honest hatred.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There's a purity in that kind of hatred.
So if you're watching again, sir, thank you for
if you're
comment.
hate watching us.
Right. We appreciate it. And I apologize we didn't read the whole thing, but Russell was afraid it would slow the show down too much. Arpoon, did you see Matt Gaetz defend Ilhan Omar? I didn't. Is that a rhetorical thing? Like, did he not defend Ilhan Omar? Or did he? If he did, I didn't see it. I'll have to watch.
I guess he's saying he did. I didn't see that.
That would have been an interesting thing to cover. Maybe we should have kept our eye out.
I mean, my hot take on what? Hang on a second. I'm addressing. See, this is why you should keep. I never said that. I said that white wokesters appropriated the term woke from black activists, Cassandra. So I think you misunderstood me.
Right, exactly.
They
you said that a while back.
Yeah, I don't know where you got that from, but you stand corrected.
Yeah. No, it's a good thing you caught that. Regular hate mail segment if you keep getting them. Yeah, if we keep getting them. Well, we are thinking about ending each show by reading some of the funniest comments that we get on our videos as a little sign-out thing. We're thinking of maybe starting that up. Maybe Extra Bulla can read some hate mail when he hosts on Thursday. I think Extra Bulla would be great at that. I think he'd be very good at that.
He probably, he would.
Yeah, I think he'd do very well with that. All right, should we start segment number 1?
Let's do it.
All right.
Issue 1.
Ukraine 1. Yes,
no,
exactly.
Not really.
Time to get very serious. No, not talking about Ukraine tonight. We'll be talking a lot about Ukraine, though, as the anti-war rally draws nearer. I'm trying to maybe put together a show where we interview a few speakers there before that rally takes place. But stay tuned for that. The DNC officially reshuffled its primary calendar for 2024. Now, in previous years, obviously the early state order was Iowa, then New Hampshire, then Nevada, then South Carolina, and then Super Tuesday. The new 2024 calendar, which has been finalized, they just have to get the states to agree to it, which we'll talk about in a second, is as follows. South Carolina will be February 3rd, just about a year from today. Nevada and New Hampshire will vote together on February 6th. The 13th, a week later, will be Georgia. The 27th, 2 weeks after that, will be the Michigan primary. And then after that, obviously, will be Super Tuesday. Now, New Hampshire has some kind of state law where apparently they have to, according to them, be the first primary in the nation. Iowa is a caucus, so New Hampshire takes a lot of pride, apparently, in being the first in the nation primary. And so they are saying, in response to this, that they may hold a primary, the New Hampshire State Democratic Party may hold a primary before February 3rd, in defiance of the DNC's official slate. If they do that, the DNC said they can punish them by basically nominating delegates away from them at the summer convention. In other words, tell them,
get your fucking shine box.
You know, that would be their response to New Hampshire thinking that they're going to go first. But obviously, Crystal and Kyle pitched this as reason to be hopeful for Marianne Williamson in New Hampshire because there's going to be this uprising against Joe Biden and the Democratic leadership. But assuming they can bend New Hampshire to their will, or if they don't, I guess New Hampshire will just lose half of their delegate count at the convention. Their delegate count is not very big to begin with. It will almost certainly be of no consequence anyway. This will be the final calendar for the first 4 states. Now, the only thing that they may be trepidatious about is they don't want to create too much bad blood in New Hampshire, not because Marianne Williamson's going to win New Hampshire, but because New Hampshire is a swing state in the fall that they'd probably like to win. And so, you know, if you piss too many people off there, that could theoretically depress turnout in November. Again, this is all such inside baseball. It's hard for me to believe that a critical mass of general election voters in New Hampshire care that much. This is really all about that top state on the list, South Carolina. It's all about securing the James Clyburn endorsement and securing the state, not just for Joe Biden, but for whatever establishment candidate runs after Joe Biden. This is going to be the case well into the future now. And as South Carolina has proven, they vote how James Clyburn tells them to, right? And how leadership wants them to. This is a conservative southern state that goes red in the fall every time. And so it really makes no sense to hold this first. But you're not allowed to say that, of course, because most of the voters in South Carolina are black. And so they will hide behind that to say, oh, well, if you have a problem with South Carolina, it's because you have a problem with diversity. And of course, Nothing could be further from the truth. We've actually said on this show, back when we were an audio show, so we might not have the receipts readily available, but you can find them if you go back on the audio podcast. We always said a state like Michigan should go first because it's an extremely diverse state. You have a lot of blue-collar whites. You have a lot of blue-collar African-Americans. You have a big Muslim population there. It's a Rust Belt swing state, sort of a bellwether state. That makes sense to go first. South Carolina, this is absolutely a way to stack the deck for Joe Biden and every sort of DNC pick moving forward.
Well, that's it. This is they've wanted to do this for a long time because New Hampshire has a long history. Look, I don't think that they should continue to use New Hampshire. I don't think they would really care if New Hampshire was more inclined to bend the knee. But New Hampshire is always gumming up the works. New Hampshire, it kind of takes a perverse pride in its first place slot. That I think that's part of it. They like to be ornery. They like to throw them a curveball and vote for the non-anointed candidate. South Carolina, as we saw in 2016, and as we particularly saw in 2020, James Clyburn says jump, they say how high. And that's what they want. They want to be able to dictate the nominee, and bonus points. If you have a problem with it, you're a racist. That is the perfect setup for the Democratic Party. If they really wanted people of color to indicate their preference, the first two states would be Michigan and Nevada.
Right. Exactly.
They're not doing that. And there's a reason, because they tend to be more left-leaning in the African-American community in Michigan. And they're very left-leaning in the Latino community in Nevada. That's the last thing they want.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the DSA basically took over the Nevada State Democratic Party to the point where the party leadership quit. They exited. They quit the party.
Yeah.
Right. We did a show on that a while back. And so Nevada makes sense. Michigan may be a little bit big. Like, I think part of the reason why they put Iowa and New Hampshire first, it's not that they were all white states, is they're relatively small, which means they're relatively inexpensive to run in. And so the candidates don't blow through a lot of the campaign budget in those first couple of states. So a state like Wisconsin, which has much fewer people than Michigan, but same sort of racial and class demographic diversity there, that could be good. But no, they're obviously doing this because you can predict how this state is going to vote. That's what they want. They want predictability because that allows them to control the process. You can tell the
state how to vote.
Right. Exactly. They can just tell the state how to vote. And so, yeah, so that's the rub there. That's the calendar for 2024. Obviously, we did a segment last week about how, Crystal and Kyle are trying to gas you up for Marianne Williamson because of this. I don't think New Hampshire is going to factor much into this at all. You obviously have South Carolina, Nevada, New Hampshire, but then after that you have Georgia, which will vote very similarly to South Carolina. And so, they're really sort of stacking the deck, especially this time for Joe Biden. This is also a signal. This is also a bit of chest pounding, I think, on the DNC's part, saying, hey, we are all in for Joe Biden now. So if you're thinking about running, just don't waste your time because he's got South Carolina and he's got Georgia. And at that point, what are you going to make happen? So don't bother. Just stay out of the way. I think this is a signal in that sense also.
Well, I've been saying, what on earth is this guy going to do on the campaign trail? But the more I think about it, they're not going to put him on the campaign trail because there's not going to be a real primary. Even if Marianne Williamson did decide to run, her challenge would never rise to the level that he needs to debate her anyway. He'll make a few stops. He'll eat a few corn dogs here and there, but he's not going to see a debate until there's a Republican nominee.
Right.
So actually that's I take that back. That, oh my God, but wait until they see him campaign. There isn't going to be a campaign. There will be a campaign at the end, but by then he's the nominee.
Right.
And that's a question. I've been saying the whole time, Ron DeSantis is going to be president. That's to me, that Joe Biden is going to win a second term, out of the question as far as I'm concerned. Maybe, and you can play that back on loop if I turn out to be wrong, but I don't think I am. And on the Democrat side, there's not going to be enough action for him to have to campaign. You're really going to see that you nominated the Pepperidge Farm guy with Alzheimer's when he actually has to go out on the road to campaign against the Republican. But by then, it's going to be too late.
Yeah, and this State of the Union coming up on Tuesday is obviously going to be something to watch. I suspect he will take his fish oils or whatever the hell they give him and, do
They
fairly
shoot that guy
well,
out.
at which point, oh, what do you mean Joe Biden's too old? I could hear right now all the talking heads. We're not going to be watching them because we're going to be live streaming that ourselves. We'll do our own commentary. But I could tell, I could hear David Axelrod right now. This looks like a guy who still has his fastball. You know what I mean? Like they're going to... I can hear all that shit right now, So so in a sense, his next campaign really will begin on Tuesday, formally or not.
This looks like a man who got the good cocaine, not the stuff that's cut with baby formula and speed.
See Wolf Blitzer reading that line off the prompt. This looks like a man who's got the good cocaine. Yeah.
I saw him 20 minutes ago in the green room. He didn't know who I was.
Right, exactly. Yeah. American Wasp with Dieter McBusiness. Thank you, sir. Y'all might be tired of talking left YouTube infighting, but it seems like the camps are divided between Jimmy Dore and Company versus Kyle and Crystal and Company. More complex. Sorry, I'm not laughing at your question. I'm still laughing at the depraved loser line. It still just makes me laugh.
That was pretty funny.
I'm not laughing at you. Don't worry. More complex. Why can't we all just get along? Are you Dore fans? Well, there were quite a few questions there, but since you gave us $10, thank you so much. I'll answer them. I'm not personally tired of the infighting. We just thought we'd take a break from it this evening and try to do a show that was a little more substantive. And so far it's working out. We got a nice crowd in here. See, you guys aren't as depraved and loserly as the Vanguard crowd says you are. They're basically calling you a basket of deplorables. You understand?
They're calling you a basket of deplorables. And you know what? That proves our damn point about these two camps. In the end, they are shit lib adjacent. People who are attracted to that, they're basically shit libs who have a little more conviction about universal health care. I mean, really, because they go right to dismissing their opponents as deplorables. In the end, they're going to pull that card under pressure.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that does say something. The camps are divided between Jimmy Dore. More complex? No, it's not that complex. In fact, Russell said it on his last stream that's sort of been a split. The sort of I mean, what RBN says is actually a good way of saying it. There's the post-duopoly left, and then there's the Democrat insurgent left. Right. And I think we are in the post-duopoly camp, and that's really kind of how it breaks down.
Yeah.
More or less. Why can't we all just get along? Well, ask them. Like I said, we never said a bad word about them.
We didn't fire the first shot. Well, I'm talking about Crystal and Kyle now. Crystal came out.
Crystal said, grow up.
I've always said nice things about her. She came out and started the whole grow up. And
she started the whole.
If you want to have power, she started that. She made her bed. With the Vanguard, there are a couple of middle class morons out there, doing the Fargo extras with a podcast show.
We just thought their interview with Aaron Mate was hilarious, so we decided to do a segment for fun.
That was it. That was so obviously ridiculous that I had never even watched them actually until that. I had never seen them before. I had heard of them. I had never seen it, and I watched it. I said, "Are these guys for real? Like, really? You're going after one of the most important journalists in the United States today on nonsense, on who he coddles and who he talks to." Like, that's what opened that whole thing up. But look, man, we've said this before. We're not stupid. We know that if we did a show like that, where we just sit here and did you hear what Brianna Joy Gray said about the mustard they put on our turkey at the corner deli this week? See what Deli Man has to say back. Like, yeah, man, we'd have triple the subs, but, we won't do that kind of show. The only time we will get into those things is when it opens up a broader topic of discussion that we think is important to the left. as was the case with the recent Crystal Kyle video we did, because it's relevant because of what Nick Cruz said directly to Marianne Williamson. We don't want our fellow leftists and workers to be wasting money they don't have on a vanity campaign.
Right. Exactly.
It is not, we don't want to see people get hoodwinked and sucked in to supporting the vanity campaign of a multimillionaire. I'll tell you what, man, I said this on the show. If Marianne Williams wants to run and self-fund it, I'll have nothing to say about it. I will not say one bad word. You want to run that bad? Go call Oprah. Okay? Just don't bother the workers who already got screwed twice by Bernie to come line up behind you and give you their hard-earned cash.
Exactly. All righty. And your last question, are we Dore fans? Look, we've had plenty of criticisms of Jimmy Dore over the years, but he's been proven right more than he's been proven wrong, which is all you can say.
That's
nobody's going to be right 100% of the time in this space. It's impossible. We've gotten things wrong. I think his batting average is fairly high.
You know what Jimmy Dore makes me think of? Bill Maher said once, how do you know where the line is if you don't go over it? Jimmy Dore definitely crosses the line. But because he's willing to cross the line, he also ends up taking stands that no one else will take that more often than not turn out to be the right take. As time has gone on, at one time, I disagreed with him a lot more than I do now. But in the end, there is nothing that will win me over more than if you're proven right. He has been proven right too many times for me to dismiss his judgments.
Yeah, and the whole force the vote thing is a perfect example of that.
Right. Who took the right side of that?
Right. Exactly.
Right. So he's part of the family.
Yeah, exactly. Patreon.com/do dissidents. You can help support this show. Before we get into our second segment, we want to do our little Patreon scroll here. We want to thank Steve, our latest Patreon supporter, to sign up this week. You can go to patreon.com/do dissidents or dodissidents.substack.com. Paid subscribers at Substack and Patreon members get call-in access to all of our regularly scheduled live streams, as well as bonus video content every month. So if you can go over there and sign up, we would appreciate that very much. That's patreon.com/do dissidents. Also, while you're here, please hit that like button. And please, if you have not already subscribed to this channel, please do so. That helps us out a great deal. So I don't know how many likes we have in the stream right now because I don't have it up on my screen here. But if you can hit that like button, whether you're on YouTube, Rumble, or Rockfin, hit that like button and help us get some more people in here. All right. That's it. I think this thing started over again, right? Oh, no, it's still going. Man, we got a lot of patrons. I got to really talk when we do this scroll now. It really takes a long time, but that's a good problem to have. So thank you. Here are our newest patrons coming up. Tyler J., Peter, Adrian S., TDH, Mirthaniel, Anna Bird R., Randall S., and Steve L. Thank you guys so much for signing up.
Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's do our second segment of the evening now, shall we?
We shall.
All right. So, on January 30th, just a few days ago, the Columbia Journalism Review, which is a liberal media watchdog group founded in 1961, published an extensive report on the media failings of Russiagate. The piece is called "The Press versus the President," and it contains exclusive interviews with many involved in the whole Russiagate story, including Donald Trump himself. It's a very lengthy article. It was published in 4 parts, and it reveals the sort of evolution of Russiagate from how it started, which is sort of like this paranoid projection campaign by Team HRC, who, according to internal surveys, she was actually seen as being too friendly to Russia herself. Bill Clinton gave a paid speech in Moscow. Yep. She actually saw that as a vulnerability herself. So it started as this sort of, I know you are, but what am I?
Do we have that exhibit?
What's that?
The uranium. The uranium.
Oh, yeah. Well, the uranium one, of course. Yeah, there, we can put that up on the screen here. Actually, I got to get that in a few minutes. I thought you were going to cue that up. Sorry about that. Later in the conversation. I thought that was going to come up later. But anyway, no, go ahead.
If you need a minute, because I have right here, and so these shelves that are so much a beloved part of the set now, those go pretty far up. So I had to get a ladder to pull this out. If anybody remembers this, by Peter Schweitzer. So this was a whole book that exposed Clinton corruption, and one of the stories that it got into was how Clinton's State Department signed off on making a deal with a Russian company that had bought up a Canadian company that had huge uranium resources. This deal was going to give Russia control of 1/5 of North America's uranium. And at the same time, the company was giving huge amounts of money to the Clinton Foundation. This was pretty typical. So now the New York Times, before the Donald Trump actually won, still tried to actually do journalism. So they made a deal with Schweitzer where they could exclusively do follow-up investigations of anything that he claimed in Clinton Cash. So that was where that article came from. That was a whole article they did laying out how, suspicious the fact that Clinton's State Department signed off on handing over 1/5 of the nation's uranium to Russia looked, given all the money flowing into the Clinton Foundation. So a lot of Russiagate, based on this article and based on other research that, if you are skeptical of it as we are, you may have done on your own, was basically the Clinton campaign trying to do what Karl Rove always advised. Take your vulnerability and project it onto your opponent.
Exactly.
So the reason the Clinton campaign was so intent on painting Donald Trump as a Russian agent is because they were so vulnerable on this issue themselves.
Right. Yes. So that was the sort of genesis of the Russiagate campaign. And then what this sort of like I said, a very lengthy 4-part essay here details is how that morphed into this media frenzy. 500,000 articles were printed about Trump and Russia. 500,000.
That's
unbelievable. A huge number. That is a massive number. 500,000 article frenzy and an obsession by the media every single day from the time Trump won until the Mueller report dropped, and even after, ending in an ill-deserved Pulitzer Prize for the New York Times and the Washington Post. And then, of course, once the Mueller report came out, ended in a lot of egg on a lot of faces. But here, this is from Pulitzer.org. This is the official website. Staffs of the New York Times and the Washington Post for deeply sourced, relentlessly reported coverage in the public interest that dramatically furthered the nation's understanding of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and its connections to the Trump campaign, the president-elect's transition team, and his eventual administration. The New York Times entry submitted in this category was moved into contention by the board and then jointly awarded the prize. A Pulitzer Prize in 2018.
I've been hearing that
deeply sourced, and relentlessly reported. Well, it was relentlessly reported. I don't know about deeply sourced or well sourced, but they got that half right.
Why? I keep hearing that people have lost faith in institutions. What's going on with that? What's up with that? It's very strange. I don't get why they don't trust institutions anymore.
Yeah. Derp Diggler says election schmelection. I just like to say schmelection so we don't get picked up by too many censors because, when you talk about elections, they can nail you. But anyway, among those interviewed in this extensive 4-part piece was a guy named Bob Woodward, whose name you may have heard of, right? He was one of the Watergate reporters. And Bob Woodward came out against this Russiagate hysteria fairly early on. In January 2017, he appeared on Fox News with Chris Wallace, who asked him about the Steele dossier. This was in the days between Trump's victory and Trump's inauguration. Here he is. Let's take a look.
And this is something we discussed with both of our guests.
Sorry.
What do you think, and this is something we discussed with both of our guests, of the way that the intelligence community handled the so-called Russia dossier? And overall, how do you think of the way they've handled Donald Trump?
I think what's underreported here is Trump's point of view on it. And you laid it out when those former CIA people said these things about Trump, that he was a recruited, agent of the Russian...
Useful fool.
Yeah, and a useful fool. I mean, they started this, and in Trump's mind, he knows the old adage, once a CIA man, always a CIA man. And no one came out and said those people shouldn't be saying things. So then Act Two is the briefing when this dossier is put out. I've lived in this world for 45 years where you get things and people make allegations. That is a garbage document. It never should have been presented as part of an intelligence briefing. As you suggested, other channels have the White House counsel give it to Trump's incoming White House counsel. So Trump's right to be upset about that. And I think if you look at the real chronology and the nature of the battle here, those intelligence chiefs who are the best we've had, who are terrific and have done great work, made a mistake here. And when people make mistakes, they should apologize.
Oh, well, you're talking about a bygone era, my friends. Back in your day, the news was a loss leader, so they could apologize if they got a story wrong because the story always came first, right? They weren't incentivized in the way they were this cycle to write 500,000 articles on this to keep the money coming in. Why would they apologize? Why would they apologize just as investigations are ongoing and about to heat up? But anyway, Woodward took some flack for that, right? His peers, at the time, the Washington Post did not appreciate him going on Fox News and calling the Steele dossier a garbage document. And so he apparently went to the Washington Post and had a few talks with a few reporters there. This was revealed in this new piece by Jeff Gerth. He's the one who wrote this 4-part sort of epic Russiagate autopsy. Jeff Gerth, by the way, is a 3-decade veteran of the New York Times himself.
And also remember, this
is not a depraved loser like us writing this, right? It's a pretty credible source, and this is a pretty credible liberal watchdog journal.
He's not scrawling it on the wall of his cell in his own feces.
Exactly.
This is a real document. Also remember, this is the Columbia Journalism Review. This is not the National Review. All right.
This is a liberal
outlet. A very left liberal outlet. This is the same outlet that went after Substack for freedom of speech. Okay. So right. They're not even usually an outlet that we would like because they traffic in that.
Well, that's what makes this a noteworthy piece, is the fact that it's coming from,
of course,
people who you would have thought, an outlet like this would have taken the exact opposite stance on all this.
Of course.
But anyway, Woodward was interviewed for this new piece, and here's what he said. So as the piece reads, after his remarks on Fox, Woodward said he, quote, reached out to people who covered this at the paper, identifying them only generically as reporters to explain why he was so critical. Asked how they reacted, Woodward said, to be honest, there was a lack of curiosity on the part of the people at the Post about what I had said, why I had said this, and I accepted that, and I didn't force it on anyone. In other words, nothing was going to stop them. Nothing was going to stop them from doubling down and tripling down on this, no matter how ridiculous it seemed to the guy who broke the Watergate story. Again, a very credible source on matters like this.
And let me just say, back then, the two things that made me from the beginning decide that this was definitely BS, that I was never going to be proven wrong by taking a stand against Russiagate, which I did pretty early on, was the combination of Bob Woodward, I remember this, of him coming out against it. Because look, Bob Woodward, he is definitely a lib. but he is a journalist in the old school tradition, in the tradition that Matt Taibbi describes, where to him, the idea of getting a fact wrong would be humiliating. The idea that he really needs to be correct more than he needs to be partisan. I actually read his book on the early days of the Trump administration that were written while the administration was in office, Fear. And yeah, it was very dry and it was refreshingly honest. I thought one of the most interesting scenes in it that I think a more partisan reporter wouldn't have included was that Trump, according to people around him, seemed very disturbed by calling parents of fallen soldiers. That really, the way he described it, it really didn't fit the Trump narrative. It sounded like he was upset by doing that. And, you know, my read on it when I read that was, you know, it's one thing to fuck a guy in a real estate deal. It's another thing to be in charge of the military industrial complex and to have to call parents about their dead kid. Like, whatever you think of Trump, the kinds of evils that Trump was used to are nothing compared to the evils of running the United States. He wasn't prepared for that kind of evil. That's how I read that scene. But reading that, I had a lot of respect for the fact that he included it, because a more partisan reporter wouldn't have put that in. It was too humanizing.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is definitely a good point. And, you know, I thought that this whole piece just very, you know, methodically, like I said, it's quite long, traced the evolution of this story from a sort of campaign story that the team failed to get off the ground. I mean, Clinton's campaign was really trying to make this an issue during 2016, which really just shows you how dumb they were, how awful they were, that in a year of such obvious tumult between Brexit and the rise of Trump itself and the rise of Sanders itself, the fact that there's all this tumult happening around you and you remain stubbornly committed to exposing Trump as what? Duly loyal to the U.S. and Russia, as if it's 1974? Like, what world are you living in? What world are you living in where you actually thought that was a winning issue to begin with? The amount of capital spent on trying to get this story going during that campaign was just insane. It was just the dumbest thing you could ever. I mean, this is how that campaign lost. This campaign did not have its finger on the pulse of anything that was going on anywhere near them. Anywhere near them. They didn't go to Michigan. They didn't go to Wisconsin. They're meeting with donors all the time. They're not getting out. They're not rallying the public. And they're trying to, at the same time, paint Donald Trump as what? As Paul Krugman called him, as the piece cites, a Siberian candidate. As if this is a spy novel, as if people did not have real problems that were reaching a boiling point, and this wasn't manifesting itself in all these sorts of shock populist uprisings all around the world. Just completely missed on them.
Well, this is very typical of the problem with the Democratic Party on the whole. You know, Clinton's campaign was a microcosm of what's wrong with the post-Clinton Democrats. They don't have an economic message. And in the absence of that, they're forced to rely on trying to gin up outrage about cultural issues, which interestingly is what they accuse the Republicans of, which is not to say the Republicans are not guilty of that. Of course they are, but so are the Democrats. I mean, it's just pick your poison, you know, pick which drummed up cultural outrage machine you want to pledge your loyalty to. Also, Thomas Frank says this very well. There's a video by Thomas Frank. He did an interview with a French magazine, and it's called I think it's called Clinton Lost Because Democrats Abandoned the Working Class. It's called something like that. You can find it on YouTube. And he says, for Democrats to admit that their old working class base is now in the Republican Party is very painful for them. It's something they don't want to look at. They don't want to talk about. And for someone like Hillary to admit that is to admit that the triumph of their class, the triumph of their generation was all a mistake.
Right. Right.
Like, she could not turn back to being the blue collar Democrat. They were the ones who destroyed their relationship with blue collar people. They'd have to go back to pre-Clinton Democratic Party, and she was the last person who was going to do that. That would be to repudiate the entire legacy of her dynasty.
Yeah, and not to mention upend the entire system that they have basically been architecting for the past 40 years, right? Like, it just would have been too disruptive for them to imagine doing that. That's what Sanders represented, and that's why there was such hostility to his movement, because it was just, he represented, like you just said,
a ghost,
a repudiation of everything that they had been working towards and had really helped the Republicans work towards also. This was very much a bipartisan neoliberal project. You know, that it just would have been too disruptive for them to go down that road. And so they had to take no chances in making sure that they could not do that. And in terms of the, you know, Trump Russia narrative, just the idea that was going to be a sticking point with voters at that time was just a way of obscuring their own failures, and it continued to obscure their own failures well into the Trump years, to the point where even after the Mueller report dropped out, even today, you had David Korn at Mother Jones, who's mentioned in this article, attempt a sort of rebuttal of this and blame the fact that the Podesta emails dropped on the same day that the Donald Trump Access Hollywood tape came out, as if the American people didn't care about the Access Hollywood tape because they were distracted by the Podesta email dump and that was a Russian op. No. Once again, just a total unwillingness to acknowledge what is right in front of your face, which is the reason why Trump's grabbed them by the pussy line was not as disqualifying as perhaps it should have been, is because Hillary Clinton's husband has been credibly accused of rape, and she led the charge on his campaign to shut the women who accused him of rape the fuck up so they didn't derail his path to power, which she knew was her path to power. That's a fucked up, disgustingly amoral person who would do that. Okay? And so therefore, Hillary Clinton is no one's moral superior, not even Donald Trump's. So it's not that they liked what they heard on the Access Hollywood tape. It's that next to her record of smearing accusers of her husband, from everything from harassment to, yes, full-on forcible rape, people said, well, it's a wash. It's a wash. And that's a dark situation that the country is in when they have to make that kind of a Sophie's choice. But that's the situation that you put them in. And you need to own the fact that you put people in a spot where that Access Hollywood tape was not disqualifying. And there is no acknowledgement of that whatsoever. These people just act as if that doesn't matter to people. They act as if people are not capable of doing their own research and learning things about candidates that they don't tell them. This is another phenomenon of the Russiagate era, this idea of trustworthy and untrustworthy sources. They hate the fact that people know things that they don't tell them, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. It was really during the Trump era that something that had been bubbling really boiled over. The fact that elites felt like they were losing their power to control the conversation. And they used, this is why Russiagate won't die, because you have too many parties who benefit too much from that narrative. It allows you to justify censorship, which is something that they deeply want. And in the immediate aftermath of 2016, you had two very powerful entities in society, the Democratic Party and the media. Both had a vested interest in deflecting attention from themselves for getting Donald Trump elected. You had a media that did not want to reckon with the fact that they gave this man $1 billion in free advertising.
Right.
They did not want people talking about them covering his empty podium.
Right.
And certainly the Democratic Party did not want focus on the campaign that Hillary ran, or the fact that they anointed her as the nominee 2 years before anyone voted, in spite of the fact that they knew her flaws. They knew that she was deeply unpopular throughout the country, that she would, in fact, be the most unpopular nominee that they had ever chosen. They didn't want any attention on that. So that's why it didn't matter what Bob Woodward said to them. There was no upside to them in listening to Bob Woodward.
Right, exactly. They needed something. They also needed their own.
They
excuse,
needed it. Right. They needed Russiagate.
Tusker is on the line. Tusker, do you want to talk? Your mic is on. Yep. All right, I'll call on Tusker. Tusker is a Patreon supporter. Hey, thank you for calling in. Good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you guys. How are you?
Doing all right.
Good. I just kind of want your opinion, and especially since Pasta's in the audience.
Since who's in the audience?
Pasta.
Pasta, yeah. Hopefully
yeah,
Pasta stuck around.
I'm sorry, my audio's a little low.
No, it's okay.
I'm kind of curious about.
Didn't he have that gun running thing tonight?
I'm sorry.
He's doing an expose on the cartels tonight. Yeah.
No, I was just thinking about the Russiagate thing, and then the Chinese spy balloon, and all that nonsense. And I just have kind of this theory that I wanted to get sort of your opinion on.
Sure.
So I kind of feel like there are two wings of the capitalist class. One is finance capital, and one represents more of industrial capital. With Russia being linked to the petrodollar and all that other type of stuff, I feel like Wall Street, financial capital, that is more of the Democratic Party and what they're sort of focused on, and their obsession with Russia. And I feel like the Republican Party sort of represents more of industrial capital. And that's the reason why they tend to focus so hard on China. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think that's an interesting theory. In a way that is sort of an extension of the sort of shifting demographics of the Democrat and Republican base, right? The Democrats now represent more the white collar world, and the Republicans' appeal to sort of blue collar voters is growing. Our friend Anish Shivani would be able to flesh this answer out much better than I could, because he talked about it very, very brilliantly, I think, about Trump representing this sort of bygone sort of analog world. You know, even the fact that he is perceived as a builder of buildings. You know, he got his start in construction, doing tangible things, making things and selling things, whether it's a hotel room or, you know, even the stupid stuff, even steaks and water or his golf clubs, right? Like, these are actual physical products or physical places that people can come and either experience or consume. Whereas the Democrats now, on the other hand, represent, like you were just saying, this sort of world of abstractions, a world of data, a world of information, right? A world of banking, a world of moving numbers around on a screen. And so perhaps that approaches an answer that satisfies you. I'm not sure, but that would be the closest I could come.
Yeah.
I would say the two are really inseparable. If you follow Wall Street, look, man, if the money's to be made this week in Caterpillar, their money's in Caterpillar. If the money this week is to be made in Apple, their money is in Apple. So the people really running shit, they have their fingers in all of those pies. But overall, in the late stages of an empire, you see the economy become financialized. That is a symptom of the end of an empire, because initially the empire rises by making things, and often by mastering a new energy technology before other people do. That was wind power for the Dutch. That was coal for England. And it was oil for us.
Steam.
Now, right. So now, as you get into the later stages of the empire uses its military might and its influence around the world to shift everything to financialization, because it can rig the game in its favor. It can rig the flow of capital and resources around the world and within the boundaries of the empire in its favor. So financialization becomes attractive, but that also hollows out your economy and makes it very fragile, because at that point, your economy is only going to last as long as that military control does. And as soon as that military control falters, and it always does, it comes down like a house of cards, because there's really nothing inside.
Yeah.
That's why, look, you look at A Christmas Carol, that whole world they're describing of these financial counting houses and Scrooge and Bob Cratchit, that's describing England in the later phase of its empire. It's not an accident that Scrooge doesn't run a coal mine, right? He runs a financial house because that's England in that period at the end of its empire.
Yeah, I was just trying to kind of figure out, because, you know, obviously the capitalists, they're all together. You know, they're all on the same page. They all want kind of the same things, but every now and then it seems like they have these fights kind of between each other. And that's kind of what I was curious about.
It's more a fight of culture than capital, because the flow of capital will go wherever there's. Look, man, you follow Wall Street, it's like hanging out at the OTB. It's a bunch of degenerate gamblers, basically. They don't give a shit. They'll put their money anywhere there's money to be made.
Yeah. All right, cool. I just wanted your opinion on that. You guys have a nice night.
Oh, of course. Thank you for calling.
Thank you, Tusker.
Thanks again. All right, let's catch up on some super chats here. Let's not make the same mistake that we made last time. We have one more segment that we're going to do, folks. But before that, Chris Bishop, $2 to support Keaton's move to Albany. Good luck. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I'll be leaving the town, I know, fairly soon. Devin, Vanguard boys are political Teletubbies. Well, acting like a good producer there, sticking up for the hosts, right? Sticking up for the talent. Thank you, Devin. Appreciate it.
For the talent, that's right.
For the talent, right? You got to pamper the talent, the fragile talent. I think we have one more. I think I saw it. I think it was from Harpoon. Hold on, I'm scrolling. See, we're trying to get good at this, folks. I'm really making an effort tonight not to miss any. But the chat is moving very fast, so thank you guys all for being here. And by the way, like and subscribe if you have not already. That's very important. So please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Harpoon, who do you think could lead a third-party run? If you're talking about who can run and win, I mean, that's obviously extraordinarily difficult. The one guy who I say could do it is still, despite the fact that the years are piling up, I still think Jesse Ventura is a political force. Who is equally credible as an underwater demolitions expert and a pot-smoking hippie. I mean, he has immense cross appeal. He is perfectly genuine in both those roles because he is both of those things. Yep. And he's proven that he can win as a third-party candidate already. He was elected governor of Minnesota. He got into that campaign pretty late, caught some media fire, made the debate stage, and then won. And so, I mean, if there's anybody, I think it's him. And, I would love to get in touch with him and have him on the show because I've been a big fan of his for quite some time. So that would be my pick. I don't know, Russell, do you have anybody else that strikes you as maybe not to win, but someone who can make noise in that way?
To place or show?
To place or show, right?
Are we talking about someone I'd want to see run? Or somebody who could get some momentum? I mean,
either one,
because that may be two different questions.
Well, that's up to you.
Okay. I would say Elon Musk, or actually Mark Cuban.
Yeah, that's true. Mark Cuban could actually.
Now, this is not. I want Mark Cuban to run, but you're asking me who do I think could get some momentum behind them? Probably Mark Cuban.
Yep, that's true. He's a good pick too. I think he is a good pick. Because he'd be able to just self-fund, right. And he's a star.
He'd be able to self-fund. He's really liked by the Wall Street Bets crowd. Right. He's not this radical that's going to scare the conservatives, but he has enough of a critique of capitalism as it's practiced to win over some of the libertarian/left people. So yeah, man. I mean, he wouldn't win, but I think he could. He'd be formidable.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer also. All right. Should we get our last segment in the can here?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. So as part of his continuing war on wokeness, an effort to make Florida the state where woke goes to die, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis rejected the College Board's AP African American Studies curriculum, effectively banning it from Florida schools. Now, in response, although they deny this was due to political pressure, which you could take that for what it's worth. I think that's pretty much bullshit.
It's not, and it's not just Florida. I think it's like 22 states have passed variations on the anti-woke law.
Yeah. So what they did was they cut several components of the course in order to get it passed. And these sort of components of the course that were cut include sections on Black Lives Matter, Black LGBTQ issues, reparations, and mass incarceration. Now, Jordan Peterson, who is an avowed anti-wokester himself, as well as a DeSantis supporter, maybe not an official endorser for 2024, but he's definitely spoken very highly of him recently. He went on Joe Rogan's show, and when the topic of censorship came up, Jordan Peterson took it upon himself to fire a shot at DeSantis, criticizing his sort of CRT bans. So let's just take a listen to this. This is a little under 2 minutes.
I mean, the fact that anyone would ever think that any of this stuff is a good idea, that people don't understand, like, the dangers of censorship. They don't understand where this leads to.
Yeah, well, we're seeing a little bit of that emerge on the right now, which is kind of frightening to me. So I'm an admirer in many ways of what's going on in Florida, with DeSantis. But him and Rufo, who I also think has got a bit of a clue, are trying to, what would you say, limit or even ban critical race theory. And the problem with that is you can't define it, right?
Right.
So how do you control something you can't define? And the answer is you battle it out on the battleground of ideas. Because as soon as you start to try to define it and then try to censor it, well, first of all, that's just going to grow because that's how those things work. Like where does critical race theory shade into Marxism? Well, who the hell knows? Where does Marxism shade into socialism? Well, that's an even harder question. Then where does socialism shade into, just being on the side of the working class? Well, all that's fuzzy beyond belief. And so once you get to the point where the government has to step in and regulate, say, what education systems are doing, you're already in deep trouble. And because I don't see how it can really be done. Because I can't define critical race theory. More or less you can get some sense of the cloud of ideas that's associated with it. But trying to draw the lines, how are you going to do that? And then, of course, you enable, inevitably, no matter what your goal is to begin with, you're going to control a certain form, let's say, of pathological communication, misinformation. That's just going to play into the hands of people who like to censor, and that's just as likely on the right as it is on the left. So, no, it's a real dangerous game.
All right. So, Russell, what are your takes on that bit before we go into anything else?
This is okay. All right. Firstly, with Jordan Peterson, I've said this before, and we're going to get some angry comments in the when we put this video up. Because you have some people who just absolutely hate Jordan Peterson. I do not, if you sit down and you listen to Jordan Peterson, I agree with some of what he says. I don't agree with some of what he says. What is batshit crazy to me is making out this Kermit the Frog talking Canadian guy as bringing on the Fourth Reich. It's ridiculous. And this kind of demonstrates it. You don't have to agree with what he says, but is he a malevolent, dishonest actor? Well, this kind of displays that no, he's got his own convictions. He's got his own beliefs. If he were really just servicing the right, he would never say this. He knows that this is not what they want to hear from him over at his employers, the Daily Wire, that right. He's pissing off a potential future president by offering a critique. This is consistent. This is moral consistency. Jordan Peterson first, I believe this is when he first drew all this negative coverage, was when he came out against the Canadian law that you cannot misgender somebody. And his argument was never, I would refuse to identify someone by their chosen pronouns. His argument was always, you cannot legally compel me to do that. Now, this is consistent with that stand. He's saying he's uneasy, even though he probably agrees with DeSantis's overall principle, with the government getting involved in education in this way. Now, this has opened up a very interesting debate, an intramural debate that at least so far is polite. Christopher Rufo, who's really been acting as the point person and spokesperson for DeSantis's efforts, not only to enforce these standards within the K through 12 system, but also to reform the public college system in Florida. Chris Rufo has really been the person engaging in these debates while DeSantis goes and does his thing, legislates. So Rufo did respond, and we have some of that response, yes?
No, I didn't get the Rufo response. I told you we didn't have it.
Oh. All right, never mind. Well, Rufo came back, and his argument was essentially that to say that the education system is not already politicized is a canard, that's not really true, that you do have an activist movement that is attempting to define education and how education is served to the students. Their overall argument is that the people elect their elected representatives to create standards for these public institutions. We're not talking about private schools in Florida. They can do whatever they want. They're arguing these are public universities and these are public schools. And the public in Florida is overwhelmingly for the moves that DeSantis is making in this direction. So they're arguing, hey, look, A, your argument that education is not political is wrong. And B, the government is empowered by the voters with the power to enforce education standards on public institutions. So we do have, I know we have footage of DeSantis responding to press questions about this.
Yep, here we go.
Then we will do this course. So when I heard it, we didn't meet the standards, I figured, yeah, they may be doing CRT. It's way more than that. This course on Black history, what's one of the lessons about? Queer theory. Now, who would say that an important part of Black history is queer theory? That is somebody pushing an agenda on our kids. And so when you look to see they have stuff about intersectionality, abolishing prisons, that's a political agenda. And so that's the wrong side of the line for Florida standards. We believe in teaching kids facts and how to think, but we don't believe they should have an agenda imposed on them. When you try to use Black history to shoehorn in queer theory, you are clearly trying to use that for political purposes.
Okay. So, well, do you want to say anything on this?
Well, on the main point here, I mean, look, when it comes to African American studies and critical race theory, there's no reason that the two have to be lumped. And the lumping that's going on in academia is a function of the fact that, look, there are a lot of old school professors, and I say old school professors because really, I mean, I just don't buy that academia on a whole even functions this way that much anymore. But there is a tradition at the university that the university is sort of a lab where we test new theories and new thoughts and new attitudes and new sort of approaches to political questions or social questions or scientific, right? Now, the thing about new ideas is most of them are not very good because most new anything is not very good. That's just that's just basic Darwinism, right? How do species evolve? Organisms mutate. Most mutations are not viable, right? Most mutations do not adapt well to the, to their surrounding environments, right? And so most mutations fail, but through the process of mutations, good mutations survive and evolve and change. So that's sort of what the university system is for ideas. The problem is And this, I think, has been accelerated in the Trump years, but it certainly predates the Trump years. In recent years, the criteria by which we evaluate and therefore distinguish good ideas from bad ideas has changed, right? Historically, what constitutes a good idea, a good political idea in an academic setting, is something that furthers the society in some way, or something that is sort of broadly and sort of universally palpable and agreeable. Maybe agreeable is a little too strong a word, but universally acceptable there for most people of varying education levels, class backgrounds, even racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds. Now, and I would say this has not started with Trump, but it's definitely accelerated under Trump. That criteria has changed. Now, the people at these institutions, at these academic institutions, especially especially the more esteemed one, but even obviously on the public school level as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? They judge a good idea based on how good it makes them and their students feel about going to this institution, not so they can have things in common with their fellow citizens, but so they can feel better than their fellow citizens and therefore more deserving of a good life than their fellow citizens. Because the landscape has changed so drastically that what do we hear all of these politicians talking about now? Well, the key to a good life is a college education, right? This has been the post-NAFTA economic landscape here. So there's a huge sort of macro virtue signal going on here, which is you come to these schools not only to learn the skills and get the sort of credentials that you need to get that good job and earn that good income, right? But you also learn how to be the kind of person who deserves it. And that's the key. And that's how they distinguish a good idea from a bad idea. And therefore, very bad ideas, like critical race theory, are just pushed through when decades ago they may have failed that ultimate test. And that's what I think big picture is happening here. And what is going on in Florida is an example of populism, right? The governor is enacting popular will. He is basically one-upping or jumping over whatever institutional might FSU may have. And he's saying, basically, I don't have the drop ready because I only have two hands here, basically telling them, go get your fucking shine box. I'm the governor. This is the will of the people. We're pushing it through. And, of course, that rubs academia the wrong way. They are anti-populist. The institution of academia is an inherently anti-populist institution. It exists to differentiate the star-bellied sneetches from the commoners. That's what it's there for. And so, of course, they don't like it. Of course they don't like it. Now, if they had a good idea to push through, then maybe they'd have a better argument in this case. But it's very obvious that you don't need to teach Black history through this lens of critical race theory. You could teach it the way I learned it, the way, Russell, you learned it, the way most people in this audience of a certain age anyway have learned it, which is from a liberal universalist point of view, which is to say we explore history through our common humanity, right? And our common humanity is what unites us cosmically, spiritually, morally, as opposed to just this obviously divisive sort of way of teaching kids that ultimately, because I know there's been some talk about Marxism in the chat here, ultimately critical race theory serves capitalism. It serves capitalism because it tells people that the difference between oppressor and victim depends on the color of your skin. Why don't they separate? Here's a theory I might sign up for. Why don't you separate the kids according to rich kids and poor kids, right? then you may have something. Then you may actually be exploring relevant power dynamics. I'm kidding, of course. I wouldn't actually support that. But that would be closer. That would be closer to doing something that actually challenges the system that they claim to challenge. But of course, once again, this is college we're talking about. You don't go to college to challenge the system. You go to college for the exact opposite reason. You go to college to get absorbed into the system so you can benefit from the system. And what I told JB on his show last week, which I got a big rise out of him when I said this, he apparently liked this, is you go to college both to benefit from the system and to learn how to talk like you feel really guilty about benefiting from the system. You learn how to talk like, oh, I understand. I and my white skin, I'm an oppressor and you're a victim. And that's it. That knowledge that you gain is a substitute. It actually functions as a substitute for fighting the system and trying to upend the system. They're not trying to dismantle capitalism in these, at fucking FSU. What they're trying to do is they're trying to dethrone the straight white male from his dominant place in a capitalist hierarchy and replace him with black people and women. But the same fundamental injustices of a capitalist economic system will remain, and it will remain by design. Public schools, private schools, higher education, academia, for all this talk about how it's training a bunch of Marxist revolutionaries. No, it's not. It's training a bunch of accountants. It's training a bunch of lawyers. It's training functionaries of the system. It's not training revolutionaries. Okay, all this talk is just a smokescreen to make right-wingers believe that there's a communist revolution brewing at Florida State University. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. But critical race theory is part of the problem, not part of any kind of solution. Anyway, that was probably more than you bargained for. You asked me if I had anything to say, and then I went on.
Because usually
to
it's
answer
me.
Your question, yes, I do have something to say.
Usually it's me.
Right.
When we get onto this, usually I'm the one, So yeah, I was a little surprised that you had that much to say about it. All right, so let me attack this from another angle. I'm constitutionally incapable of saying 2 + 2 = 5. You cannot get me to say 2 + 2 = 5. So much of all of this is built around a perversion of postmodernism. Postmodernism broadly was concerned with meta-narratives, with how society and culture is built around meta-narratives that reinforce a certain perspective on reality. They don't have any real substance. Now, I say it's a perversion of that because in presenting the idea that society, that heteronormativity and so on are meta-narratives, they've created their own extremely doctrinaire and inflexible meta-narratives. This is why some people, when I've attacked postmodernism when talking about this, like friend of show Anish Shivani, has been taken aback by it and defended postmodernism. And strictly speaking, they're right. They're right, because the postmodernists would have found critical race theory, queer theory, they would have found it ridiculous and contradictory to their beliefs, because clearly these are meta-narratives. You're trying to replace a set of meta-narratives with a set of meta-narratives. Now, that's not an accident. They took the parts of postmodernism that were useful to a political project. The idea that reality itself is not real, that it's socially constructed. So once it's socially constructed, well, now it just becomes who can shout the loudest. So they took elements of the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci's idea of a long march through the institutions. His idea was you get certain intellectuals, artists, prominent people in the society to gradually take over the institutions. This he called a revolution of position. And he felt that that was the prelude to what he called a revolution of maneuver, which would be, battleship, tank and shit. You do that later, but first you take over all of the institutions. So, just broadly, this is what this political project is. Now, I have been screaming at the top of my lungs for the entire time that we've had this show, that if we on the left do not formulate a response to what author Andrew Doyle calls broadly critical social justice, to distinguish it from the social justice of universal liberalism, as we had practiced the effort to create a more equal union until 10 minutes ago. I have been arguing that if the left does not formulate a response to this and disown this stuff, a response to it would eventually come from the right. And then we're not going to have control over what that response is. And we're not going to like it because most of the country, let's say you agree with this 100%, right? You agree with this whole school of thought. You cannot get away from the fact that it is repulsive to most people, including a lot of people who voted for Joe Biden, right? Now, if you give them a non-Trump alternative, like say Ron DeSantis, who's not, going to make them drop their monocle in the T every time he tweets, they're going to vote for that guy. And you saw in the midterms, you saw that with DeSantis's performance, right? He cleaned up. He swung some Democratic districts by 20, 30, 40 points.
Right.
So what do you think a guy like that is going to do running nationally against a mummy like Biden? Like this is the bottom line. I don't agree with it as a theory. My argument is not simply strategic. My argument is also that philosophically, these ideas are extremely damaging and they're setting us back from the progress that we had made because these people have single-handedly rehabilitated the idea that race is paramount and that segregation is acceptable. We spent over a century arguing that our common humanity is the most important thing about us, and they have rehabilitated the idea that actually to see someone as human first is racist. You know who agrees that your race is paramount? The Klan. Nazis. That is who believes that your race is paramount. And one of the things that was in this AP course that DeSantis struck down was actually one of the things they objected to was there was a section called post-racialism and color blindness and racism, arguing, as some have, that color blindness is racism, that the idea of judging someone by the content of their character is racism. Now, of course, they need to get around that famous quote by MLK because nobody wants to disown MLK. They'll claim that that's not what he meant. But I don't know. MLK was very clear with his language. He was pretty careful with his words. I look forward to the day that people are judged not by the color of their skin, by the content of their character. I don't see how many ways you can take that. I don't feel like that's really open to interpretation. They'll try because that obviously stands in the way of that argument. So I think as the left, we need to reject this way of thinking, which is not, as they would like you to believe, synonymous in any way with rejecting the struggle for equality, the struggle against racism, the struggle against homophobia, the struggle against transphobia. That does not invalidate any of that. That is a left project. But this is not the way. This is not the way to do it. And I have been saying for years, if we do not push back against this, the right is going to, and we're going to lose control of the conversation. And that's exactly what's happening.
Yep, absolutely. Tusker, thank you for the $5. Tusker's who we just spoke to, everybody, for those who are new here. She's a patron and a frequent donor and supporter, so thank you so much. The knee-jerk reflex to defend CRT by progressives have been incredibly damaging to any form of class politics. I agree with you. Thank you again. I'm going to bring up another comment here, but I want to get to the super chat first here because I don't want to miss any more. All right, I'm going to bring in Ellen in a second here because she just sent us a chat here. From my perspective, thank you for the $10. It seems like the left is on one side of the anti-black coin. Doesn't matter whether it's DeSantis, Biden, or even AOC. The outcome seems the same for black Americans. Well, yeah, I mean, look, one guy who really brought me around on some of these issues is Marcel Dixon, who made a controversial appearance on our election night stream. I'm sure most people in the audience wouldn't agree with him on everything. I certainly don't. But he really convinced me of the importance of a specifically black centered sort of program that can be messaged, because a lot of, and certainly especially blacks in the South, and he's from South Carolina, he actually ran a primary against Clyburn, who we mentioned earlier in the show, obviously. You know, a lot of black people in the South are pretty much disenfranchised, right? Because they vote Democrat in these majority Republican states. And for that reason, I think a lot of their issues just sort of fall by the wayside. And so I think that is a very important thing. And I think that's something that should be messaged a lot more. And I think there are great, I mean, even if you're coming at this from a sort of cynical political standpoint, I think there's a lot more fruit to bear on that tree than a lot of politicians realize, because a lot of black people don't vote for exactly the reason that you just wrote there. And, you know, to really animate that base could be a real game changer in a lot of places around the country that you would not necessarily think. I mean, these southern states have huge African-American populations. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think like Mississippi and Alabama are like half black states. So why are they these deep red states? It's because so much of the black population has given up. They don't vote because there's not a message catered to them, you know? Right. And I think that's a real shame.
Well,
and
not a party that's doing anything for them.
Well, right. Absolutely. I want to address one thing here. I'm going to bring Ellen in because there were a couple of people who had some pushback for us, but I would like to address that. But for some reason, you guys are too active tonight, which is a good problem to have. I lost it. So here, let me bring in Ellen. Hey, Ellen.
Hey there.
And go ahead, say your piece. I'm going to try and find these chats here.
Okay. I'm going to. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? You just put your headphones down.
Just barely. I don't know. I can't seem to get the volume up. But
well, your headphones are on, right? Are those headphones you just put down?
Well, I took them out.
Oh, okay. If you put your headphones in, you may be able to hear me.
You think it'd be better? Okay.
Maybe, I would think. This way you got a speaker right in your ear.
Try again.
All right.
How about that? Can you hear me now? Any better? Any better?
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, there we go.
So I agree with everything y'all are saying in terms of the way to go. But what's getting lost in this is what critical race theory actually is.
You're talking about the legal theory going back to the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Like what a textbook definition would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
no, I understand. There's some daylight there.
It has a lot of value because what Delgado, for example, was saying, and this was all part of the civil rights movement, is that laws are not neutral.
Sure.
That laws have a context.
Sure.
And when the context is segregation and racism, that's going to be reflected in the laws.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Delgado, for example, who was one of the first, it's his book that I have on my shelf upstairs. I believe they were at the University of Alabama, and they were trying to address this. And so somehow this has gotten co-opted into these silly things. I mean, nobody's going to, if you have a class in critical race theory, it's going to be in law school. Maybe.
Well, okay. This is a fair point.
You're not going to be teaching it in kindergarten.
Well,
first of all, that's not, first of all, that's not really what's in question here when we're talking about the College Board and AP studies, right?
Right. And also, I mean, this is part of what Peterson is talking about there. He's saying, well, how do you define it? And that's part of his reservation about the state banning something that is so
right. And he talks about this cloud of ideas.
Sure. And he's right, and you're right. And sometimes when we've talked about this, I've tried to make a distinction because as defined by Bell, I don't disagree with that in and of itself, that the law is not neutral. I mean, it's kind of taking the long way around to what should be an obvious observation, but okay, fine.
Well, but that's not, hold on. I mean, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's a very important point, that it's taking the long way around to what should be an obvious observation. Where does that draw focus, right? Like, where does your focus land when you take that roundabout way to what should be a fairly obvious conclusion, which is that laws have inherent biases in them, right? What is the virtue in framing it exactly in that way, as opposed to framing it in the way that it was framed when I went to school? You know, I had, my brief time in college, I took a course on black leadership. And the guy who taught it was he was a real deal guy. If I knew then what I know now, I would have chewed his ear off. But he actually knew Che Guevara personally. He actually met Che Guevara when Che came to the UN. He had lunch with him. And Che told him, "Don't come to Bolivia with me," because he wanted to come fight with me. He says, "Don't come. You're a young guy. You have your whole life ahead of you. I don't want you to get hurt." Because he knew he was going to die there, right? That's what he was saying. So he's a real deal guy, right? He talks some real deal stuff. He framed it in terms of macro power dynamics that affect everybody. He did not single me out as one of the only white kids in the classroom and say, you need to think about this as a white person, about how you benefit from systems that your African-American classmates don't, because what does that do? That puts the onus on me to reflect on myself. That is not a threat to any kind of system at all. That is the opposite. That is a way to obfuscate where actual power lies and how actual power is wielded against minorities, yes, but also, as we know, all sitting here, majorities of people. Majorities of people are subjugated by these power dynamics that exist. Right. And what we're saying is that even in the example that Russell gave, the certainly, look, people can have their preference. Look, I'm not for or against the banning of it, because I think Jordan Peterson does make a fair point. Right. But what I'm saying is, from a political standpoint, what makes more sense? What makes more sense even from a revolutionary political standpoint, if we want to talk like radicals here, right? If we actually want to cosplay in that way, right? Rallying people against macro power dynamics, against macro power forces as people with things in common that transcend whatever background we have, racial, ethnic, religious, right? Or as Russell said, just taking a sort of roundabout way there that distracts us by framing it in this way. I don't know if that makes total sense. I don't know.
Well, if you want to see that these ideas are no threat to power, just look at how broadly they've been accepted among our elites.
Exactly.
If they were any real threat, if they were not a distraction from unifying the working class, which is really their greatest fear. That for rich people, that's like the ancient fear of the Europeans, of the Mongol hordes coming in from the East, which has a lot to do with this tension they've always had with Russia around those countries. That is their fear, class unity. This project is caught on the way it has because it undermines class unity. You would never see a rainbow on the side of a Starbucks cup if it was any real threat to them. That is why, and and that's not to say there's anything wrong with it in and of itself, but it's co-opted by powerful elites for their own interests.
And that's what I'm trying to focus in on, is that it's been co-opted.
Sure.
And it has absolutely nothing to do with actual critical race theory. And Jordan Peterson can talk about this cloud of ideas that nobody can get their hands around, but in fact, it's not a cloud of ideas, and you can get your hands around.
But
ideas
evolve. Ideas evolve. You cannot say that as these things are defined today, it's the same as it was in law school in 1975. It's
Right.
It's broken out of that milieu. It's glommed onto a lot of other
To
ideas.
what end?
And,
To me, it's the same thing as people saying liberation theology is about charity, and it's evolved. No, it's been co-opted. It's not about charity. It's about justice.
Sure, but now it's evolved into something else. And sometimes because of what you're saying,
I don't think it has. I think it's just
have you ever
co-opted.
read? Yes, but now you could call it, if you want to call it something else, because it gets into this easily gets into semantics. If you want to call it anti-racism, as represented by Ibram X. Kendi, you could call it that. If you really want to protect the legacy of Bell and critical race theory as it was conceived in 1970s. But that's not really what we're talking about anymore. And again, I mean, I think saying the justice system is racist is like saying water's wet. I don't think you needed to establish an entire academic discipline around that. But what we're talking about today, first of all, claiming that it's not in the schools is absurd, because people are going through these education programs that are then call it anti-racism, call it postmodern theory, inflected approach to concepts of racial justice. But that seems like a long way to say it. I mean, I understand the confusion. And I think part of the confusion is that the people who promote these ideas gaslight you as soon as you try to challenge them on them by claiming that these ideas are not actually being taught, right? And they'll turn it into a conversation that, well, in Florida, they don't want to teach slavery. By law in Florida, they have to teach African-American history by law. So it's not a question of whether we're going to teach this or not. That is a deflection. Now, if you feel that the stand that people are taking against this is wrong, debate it on its own terms. Debate if you debate the premise that white people are inherently oppressors. Debate it.
We're talking about
on its
two
terms.
different things.
We are. but it's evolved. That's what I'm saying. Like, and
I
that's
don't
part
think
of
that
what's
it has evolved.
Then call it something else. Call it
I think it's
anti-racism. Okay, are you saying that what we're talking about doesn't exist, or are you saying we should call it something else? Because that's two different things.
I'm saying when you talk about it in terms of being critical race theory, that's not what's going on.
So you're saying to call it something else, or you're saying that something can't evolve beyond how it was originally conceived.
I don't think it has evolved.
You don't think it has?
It hasn't evolved. That's just to take a phrase and a theory and turn it into something that it never was. And I don't see the value in that. Why not just say, I mean, who's teaching legal theory to kindergartners?
No, but we're not talking about kindergartners here.
And they're not teaching it in that form. They're not teaching it that way.
They're not.
But they're teaching.
Oh,
they're teaching ideas. Well, not kindergartners, but they're teaching ideas that, although yes, look, Taibbi wrote a great 4-part article about what actually happened.
Wonderful.
So he wrote a great 4-part article about what actually went down in Loudoun County and why.
This was in the run-up to the governor's race.
I've read that. Yeah. And it was
that is what
beautiful.
we're talking about. So call what he's describing whatever you want, but don't say it doesn't exist. Don't say it's not happening.
Of course not. I'm just saying it's not critical race theory. That's all I'm saying. It's not critical race theory. Why are we saying it's critical race theory?
So call it
not?
Because that's a semantic thing. I mean, call it
It's
anti-racism.
not semantics.
Well, the question becomes:
you take a legitimate issue that was part of the civil rights movement,
right.
and where smart, engaged people were saying that the law is not neutral, that we have to keep our eye on the context. And somehow this has been, I don't get it. It's been how somebody even found critical race theory, how they even found it.
Sure.
And now they're saying we don't want to teach it in a. I mean, does that mean we can no longer talk about the fact that laws are not neutral?
Well, look, I mean, I think this touches on an interesting question, and this is an open-ended question because I myself am not sure of the answer to this, although I have my suspicions. Do you believe that DeSantis and, you know, all of these sort of politicians who are making hay of, you know, we'll just put it in quote marks for now, critical race theory, right? Do you think their end goal in all of this is to sort of put the ick on critical race theory so that legitimate, sort of more traditional, or at least critical race theory as it is technically, legally defined, now has this ick on it and will not be taught? So, like, we won't learn about the racial biases in the criminal justice system, or even, you know, housing systems, policing, you know, right on down the line? Or do you think that this is just a phrase that they are using, not necessarily to put the ick on the actual, you know, technically defined critical race theory, but rather as a way to gin up a sort of culture war and animate the most reliable voting bloc in America, which are parents? And that's what I think this is about. Now, I could be wrong, right? I mean, there may be some effort to just delegitimize CRT academically so that we no longer look at racial biases in the legal system. I'm sure there are politicians out there who would like to see that happen. However, I don't think you would see the kind of potency that this issue has if that were how this were being weaponized right now, at least in the short term. I think critical race theory, as Russell's talking about, is just a stand-in for whatever you want to call what was going on in Loudoun County. There are politicians who know that parents are pissed about that, and they know they can drive the vote based off of outrage over that, and so they're using that. And maybe critical race theory caught some friendly fire in the sense that, you know, the term itself doesn't deserve to be delegitimized in that way on its own merits. But again, this is still, at the end of the day, like Russell said, semantics, right? And then it becomes this, like what do you think Ron DeSantis is motivated by? Do you think he's motivated by actually not wanting racial injustice taught in the schools? Which, hey, I'm no Ron DeSantis fan. I'm so totally open to that, right? Or do you think he realizes that you have an institution called academia that is run by people who are injecting a certain point of view that, whether you like it or not, again, I don't live in Florida. Florida is not on my short list of places to move, but the majority of people in that state have a problem with the way these academic institutions are writing their course books and writing their course materials.
Absolutely.
And so he is taking advantage of a populist outrage in that state to put short-term wins on the board. That would be, I tend to think that's more likely in this case.
I agree with you. And I agree with everything that's going on. I mean, people don't need to have somebody coming in and saying you're a racist because you're white.
But it's not just
And
that.
those kinds of things.
And he also talked about queer theory in his press conference.
Right. And what does queer theory have to do with critical race theory? It's got nothing to do with it. So we're collapsing all of these things, and we're turning very concrete problems and issues into something so abstract that we can't even address it.
Okay,
it's so abstract.
All of these ideas are coming off the same postmodernist approaches to reality, to theory, to academia.
Well, I don't think it's postmodernism. Postmodernism is about the fact that there are different approaches to reality, but critical race theory is just simply that the laws are not neutral.
All right. Again, let's drop that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what's actually being practiced in some schools, not all, In some
Sure, but
in
that
some universities, not all. Call it call it
listen,
whatever. Call it blue. I really don't care what you call it. We are
Russell, would you mind, just
describing-
for the benefit of the audience, describing briefly what was in that Loudoun County reporting?
Okay, so they brought in basically DEI experts, who were getting paid an exorbitant amount of money to come up with fixes to the problems and supposed problems in the Loudoun County school. Amongst them was to have children report on other children, kind of like a little, KGB going on there, because certainly children are reliable sources of that kind of information. Now, a lot of the people, this was portrayed as a backlash of whites, but a lot of what drove the backlash was Asians who had actually moved to that community because of its reputation for giving a great education to their children. The best solution to this in terms of the Florida situation that I've seen, I don't think they shouldn't be teaching this if it's a college level course. I don't think they shouldn't be talking about Kimberly Crenshaw. The best solution I've seen is, there's also a Black conservative tradition. If you're going to talk about this very left tradition, talk about some prominent Black conservatives, and there are Black conservative intellectuals. I don't think that something that's been so influential, that has had such a social impact, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it, I don't personally think it shouldn't be part of the coursework. I think it shouldn't be the lens. I think, and I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here, that the universities have stopped being neutral arbiters and have become indoctrinators and have become advocates for a very specific approach to academia and to academic questions and to social reform. Yes, I think the universities should teach these things. I think they should also teach other things. And I think it should be left up to the students to decide what they gravitate to the most. Now, the argument that they're making, that to pretend that there's political neutrality now and they're introducing politics into that process, that's not an honest argument. That's not an honest argument.
We're not I have no argument with that whatsoever. I've experienced that with my movie, with my appearances on university campuses. I've experienced all of that. I'm just saying that's not what critical race theory is. That's it. I don't know how it got co-opted into being something that it's not.
I mean, a lot of words and terms and ideas.
It's not just words and terms.
That's linguistics. I mean, things.
No, it's not. It's not linguistics. It's about what the thing it actually is.
So all things are exactly what they always were. Like, we never changed the meaning of a word. The definition of a term never evolves. Never evolves. That never happens.
Yes, but we're not talking about a lot of years.
A lot of other.
No, I understand. I understand.
A lot of other things have gotten caught up in it, which is exactly what Peterson says. That's exactly his argument against taking this.
Peterson doesn't know what he's talking about. Peterson is a psychologist, and he
seems like he
theory it seems speaks of a cloud of ideas.
He's talking I think his point about a cloud of ideas in society.
I think his point about a cloud of ideas is where he says, okay, I mean, look, you have to understand where he's coming from, right? He's more of a right wing guy than we are, right?
But he says right wing. I think he's he gets out of his lane too often. I think when he stays in his lane, he's I'm with him, but once you get a certain notoriety, people start asking you about what you think about this, that, and the other when you don't actually have any idea what it is. And that's what he said. He said, I don't actually know what critical race theory is.
Well, no, and that's why he would be.
Worth
Sorry, go
holding
ahead.
on to. I think it's worth holding on to. The idea that the law is not something that you excavate, that it is neutral, and that we can keep excavating it until we find the law in its purest form that benefits everyone, that in fact laws are situated in a certain context. That's it. I have no argument with the idea that the idea that all white people are racist or all of these kinds of things, and you want to go into schools and bully kids into confessing their racism. But that is wrong. But that has nothing to do with critical race theory. And so I'm interested in how it got co-opted, because I don't think Crenshaw and Delgado are necessarily on the same page.
I mean, look, that's an interesting conversation. That's an interesting thought. I think when it comes to AP African American Studies, I think the controversy here, and look, I mean, CRT, as Jordan Peterson, brought up in that interview clip, is sort of maybe in a certain sense this is not helpful, but it's probably to a certain extent being used as a sort of shorthand for this sort of anti-woke sort of crusade that a lot of these right-wing politicians are on, right? In the same way that, any catchphrase is good for any politician looking to sloganeer in that way, right? But I think no matter what you call it, I think there is a real argument to be made that, as Russell said, it's not necessarily the content, it's the lens through which you view that content, and also the forum in which you view that content. Like, the course in question here is not a legal course. The course in question here is just a generic African American studies course that studies African American history. So the application of, if we're being really textbook about this, a legal theory originating from the 70s as a specific lens through which to view laws and how they impact different people in different ways, which is all totally valid, right? Where does that fit into just a broad African American studies course, right? And should it? And that's the question that I think DeSantis is taking into his own hands, because he feels like it's a winning issue for them, because he feels like most of the people in his state are on his side. And there's this sort of cabal of unelected, unaccountable academic, elites, as I'm sure he would call them, who are trying to just sort of drive a wedge between the people in their classrooms and the rest of the state, the rest of the people in the state.
And with that, I would not disagree.
Right.
That absolutely is going on. And as I say, I've experienced it, and it's just hideous.
Okay. All right. Well, then I think.
But anyway, thank you for.
I mean, it doesn't sound like we really disagree. And again,
I don't think we disagree on anything.
It's exactly. It's gotten very slippery how you define these things, and I would argue that slipperiness is intentional, because I think a lot of people who push the ideas that I've mentioned, they don't want to have a toe-to-toe debate. So if you do corner them on this, and that's why I react so strongly to this, they'll say, well, CRT isn't being taught. That's their refuge. And technically, as you're saying, that's true. It isn't, but something is. So by refusing to name it, very often that's a way of avoiding talking about what is actually being debated, right? So very often they'll retreat to that, and then it's like trying to box smoke, right? Like they won't toe to toe have a debate because they know they're not going to win that debate if they really go toe to toe on it. Yeah. So they will retreat from any kind of confrontation like that.
Well, I think we
in the
agree.
end, my overall point has been throughout, and this is why I've been bringing it up throughout the history of the show. I saw DeSantis coming. I saw that eventually this was all going to lead to this. And I think you ain't seen nothing yet. I think this is only the beginning of what you're going to see. And I do not support it. I'm not in favor of it. I think the best solution, and this is a solution the left should have offered before a guy like DeSantis got a hold of this issue, is, hey, teach it from a neutral perspective, but teach it. I don't think these things should not be in the curriculum. I just don't think they should be presented as the final word on truth. And that's what academics have been tending to do. And it was inevitable that you'd eventually get a guy like DeSantis who was going to smell the political opportunity in this and was going to ride it, possibly, I believe, all the way to the White House.
Well, thank you for letting me into the chat.
No problem. Have the last word. Did you want to say something else? Go ahead. Yeah. Of course.
I mean, I think we're all on the same page about the basics. We're all quite opposed to the whole woke movement, and I mean, we can talk about these things, and I think that's a great thing that we can talk about them, and but I don't think we have any fundamental disagreements.
All right. Well, before you go, let me just ask you one more thing. What do you think about the Vanguard calling you a depraved, degenerate?
I am.
Oh, so they're right. Okay.
I'm a loser.
They're on point, those guys. They're sharper than we thought.
I'm a loser, baby.
All
Why
day
don't you kill
long.
me?
Yeah.
I want you to do that in the church this Sunday. I want you to sing some Nirvana.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Was that Nirvana you were just singing, or was
no, that's Beck.
That was Beck.
That's
Yeah,
Beck.
yeah,
Y'all
exactly.
are awesome. I love you. I love
All
you
right.
both.
Well, we love you too, Ellen. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Sure. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, there are some balls we have to ride soon, so I guess we should sign off. Right?
Yeah, man. So, I'm going to say before we sign off, like, conversations like that, unlike a lot of people in the space, we're not going to shy away from that kind of thing. We're not going to take the party line on that kind of thing, or we're not going to go out of our way to challenge the party line either. Like, we're always going to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we put that segment last because we knew it would be a long one, right? And so, but we were looking forward to it. I mean, I was looking forward to it. I thought it was good.
Yeah. I was glad Ellen came in to push back a little bit. So it was just the two of us ranting.
Of course. Look, one of the things that the right is much better at doing than the left is controlling narratives. And they control narratives through very shrewd application of labels.
They're very disciplined.
Right? And so whether they're right or not, they know how to stay on message. They know how to craft a message. And, once the horse leaves the barn, it's very tough to rein it back in. So, like, look, I understand the argument fully that, if people feel committed to defending the merits of what CRT, technically speaking, is, they may feel like they have to go to bat for it. But the problem is, it becomes a situation where you end up talking about two different things because that messaging machine has already been weaponized against it. And Russell, like you were just saying, this is how this happens, because when you give the right wing, especially a shrewd political operator like Ron DeSantis, when you give him an opening to make that kind of argument, and yes, co-ops, granted, that kind of language, this is what happens, right? Take your eye off the ball 2 seconds. Oh, now he's already off to the races. He's off to the races, and he has the state behind him.
And this has been my concern overall with all of this. You get, I mean, there's a lot of support in the chat. We have a lot of people who, as soon as you start challenging the shibboleths, which kind of goes to my point, I'm out of here. Okay, man. Like, if you got a valid point of view, man, stand for it. Stand up for it. Show me what I'm missing. Show me what I'm getting wrong. Now, and I always say when we talk about this, even if you think I'm wrong on the substance, that's fine. Maybe I am. I don't know. I'm not wrong on the politics. And time has proven me right about that. I've been saying this from the beginning, that what's happening in Florida is going to happen because it was inevitable. Obviously, I don't agree on the substance either. But even if you are committed to that substance, you cannot overstate how politically damaging this approach to these issues has been and continues to be to the left.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Extra Bulla wants depraved loser T-shirts printed. You're welcome. That's his idea. Well, I have to see what the exact wording actually was, but I'm actually looking forward to that. Well, most of you guys did stick around. It's a long show tonight, and it's a Sunday night, so. Although I was going to say you guys got work tomorrow, but losers that you apparently are, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe we could go even longer.
Well, it's not lights out in the prison yet.
Yeah, right, exactly. Guard hasn't come around yet. Alrighty, everybody. Well, we will be back here Tuesday night at 8:45 p.m. We will have live coverage and commentary of the State of the Union. Please, if you can support the show, go to patreon.com/DoDissidents and become a member. You get call-in access, which we obviously saw. We had 2 Patreon callers call into the show this evening, so that was great. And please subscribe to this channel on the way out if you have not already. That about does it for us this evening, does it not?
That's it.
Oh, Ellen is a sweetheart. Russell is a mensch. Long story short, see, he's the and long story short is a Ron DeSantis supporter, as we I think recall correctly, right? Because you super chatted us earlier in the stream. Well, thank you again. Thank you
for
again,
those
sir.
of you who don't tune in on Tuesday. Thank you. I will be in India for a month.
If you
are coming on Tuesday, I have one more show, and that's going to be a blue show.
Russell's got one more show before he departs for India. So if you don't catch him on Tuesday, like he said, say goodbye to him now. But please come back here on Tuesday.
Hang on. Someone says you skipped their second super chat. See, I'm paying attention.
Who skipped the second super chat? I skipped it. Who said
American Autopsy?
Oh, you gave us another $10. Is that it? Because I saw you had a $10 one. Thank you, American Autopsy. Thank you for catching us. Scrolling back, man, big chat in here tonight.
Oh yeah.
See, this is what happens when you simp for Ron DeSantis. You get a lot of
that was the most tense show we've had since Marcel broke that out on election night.
I'm keeping scrolling. Okay, here it is. Okay, here we go. Thank you, sir. Right? Yeah, there we go. Every time black people get in the mindset of macro and class, we get stabbed at the back or left in the cold. We are always a sacrificial lamb or scapegoat for other people's movements. Well, look, I mean, that's partly what I said earlier. That's partly how I answered your first super chat. Now, look, there do need to be movements towards black issues. Absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Right.
So
I
don't mean to say that these issues should not be talked about at all. In fact, I think the exact opposite is true.
Right.
The exact opposite is true.
This is what these people who espouse these ideas have done that I'm partly so hostile to. They have very successfully made it synonymous to oppose their ideas with opposing fighting racism or homophobia or transphobia. They've made those the same thing. That if you do not accept their approach to it, then you are against progress in those areas. And that's infuriating. And I think it alienates more people than it wins over to that cause.
And also, I would just make this point because I think I made this point earlier, but I will say it one more time. Making people feel guilty is not actually fighting racism in any way. This is part of the design of academia. This is what it is. It is one giant guilt suppression system. because you go to college to get ahead. You go to college not to overturn the system, but to benefit from the system. That's why you're in college. That's why you're taking out loans to be there. That's why you're buying in. You're not buying into a system that you then plan to overthrow. You're buying into a system because you want to take from it what you feel it owes you after you buy into it.
Right.
You're not actually fighting anything. What this education does to you is it gives you a way to communicate and therefore process your guilt about having benefited from an unjust system. Explain to me how that fights institutional racism in any way. I would love for someone to explain that to me. You know how I know it doesn't? Because these problems of racism, these problems of classism, but let's just focus on racism for a moment here. They continue to get worse as kids are pumped through this factory called academia.
Look at the numbers.
Do people come out of academia and actually do anything to fight systemic racism?
Right.
No. They come out of the system to get their job, get their check, and come home and cook dinner and go to sleep and repeat 5 days a week. And kids' soccer game Saturday, football game Sunday, repeat, repeat, repeat. They don't come out of it equipped to change anything. They come out of it the exact opposite way. And so all this bullshit is just that. It's just a way of signaling to the consumers of your product, which is academia, that we acknowledge that the system is fucked up in certain ways. And we took a course in it, and boy, was it gut-wrenching.
We feel
and
so
boy,
bad
did it
about
make
it.
us feel terrible.
Yeah.
Can I do anything? Well, no, I have work tomorrow. Sorry, can't show up at your,
Well, they
racial justice march
furiously tweet. They
right,
furiously
exactly. They tweet about it. It's all guilt suppression. It's psychotherapy for the PMC. That's all it is. There's nothing anti-racist about it in practice, which is where it counts. So that would be my answer.
Well, that was a lot of what I think Jordan Peele was getting at with Get Out. I voted for Obama twice.
I'd vote for a third time if you ran, right? Exactly. All righty, guys. Well, thank you very much. This was a fun show, very active chat as always. I'm glad we caught your second super chat there, my friend. So thank you for catching that. And I think we did pretty good. I think we got all the super chats this evening. So thank you, guys.
We got everyone's super chat. Yeah.
I'm pretty
Speak
sure.
now or forever hold your peace.
There we go. All right, everybody. We will be back here Tuesday nights. Russell. I said Russia. Russell will be going to India. Thursday, we're back.
Do not slip up on air.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That was a close one. Yeah. Extra Bulla on Thursday, and then JB from RBN on Sunday. Thank you guys very much. We'll see you Tuesday night, 8:45 p.m. right here. Be safe. Be well. See you next time.
Good night and good luck.
Please clap.